We are live.
Welcome to Perspective Shift. How are we doing, guys?
Doing well.
Good.
Yeah.
We've got a very special guest with us today. Her name is Miss Celeste Rains-Turk. Celeste, how are you today?
Amazing.
Good.
Grateful to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Excited to have you.
Yeah, she's an impressive young individual. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you hear your story and kind of get to chat with you for a bit.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
All right, so let's start out with what are you doing right now? Like, what are your businesses? Because
Yes.
Yeah,
So
let's start with
anytime
that. Let's go
people
right
ask
in.
me,
Yeah.
like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, whatever needs to be done when it
there
needs
you
to
go.
be done.
That's the way of the world right now. She's a hit person. If you ever need anyone killed, she can take care of it. I'm just
No,
joking.
hold on a minute.
She handles it all.
We weren't supposed
That was
to
a
talk
joke.
about that. So essentially, I am a podcast host of Confessions of a Bikini Pro. I'm also a coach to competitors, so specific and with non-competitors as well.
Yeah.
But I work with them specifically on building more than just a body, hence the shirt.
Oh, there you
Nice.
go.
Yes,
Nice.
100%.
Yeah.
So the purpose behind this is to help people to essentially heal their relationship with food and their body image without sacrificing their fitness goals. A lot of the times we're taught that you can't have both and it has to be all in or all out, and I want to show people that you can have mental health and approach your goals. So that's something I do, and then I travel speaking, and I do speaking engagements.
Oh,
and
right
events.
on.
Nice. I didn't know you
Nice.
did that.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. I've been on on tour. You know,
Really?
Oh,
well,
right
it
on.
feels like that.
Yeah,
too.
no,
Great.
seriously.
No, good for you.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's like I'm sure I do other things that I'm forgetting, but those are the
Yeah, well, we'll get into that as the show
Yes.
goes on. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
all right, so and also too, where can we find you? And we'll do this at the end, and then we'll post it. So just kind of to start off, like, what's your YouTube? I mean, your
So-
Yeah,
podcast channel.
platforms.
Yeah.
Yes, so podcast you can find anywhere. Confessions of a Bikini Pro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instagram is celestial_fit.
Okay.
YouTube is the same. Facebook is the same. Everything's the same as that. And
Okay.
then my website is www.celestial.fit. And if you're looking for live events, there's a tab there that has everything listed, but also buildmorethanjustabody.com will outline that.
All right, right on. There you go. So let's start out. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, there you go. Good question.
Good question.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
grew up in Southern California.
Oh, really? What
Yes.
part?
Really?
Yes. Are you guys familiar with Ventura County?
Yes, yeah.
So I was in the little suburb Newberry Park.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, for those who don't know, that's north of LA, south of Santa Barbara, and a bit more inland than Malibu.
Okay.
It was like this heaven on earth, really.
Perfect triangulation right there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see what I
seriously.
did?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Right on. Did you ever surf?
No.
Anyone that lives in Southern California always, do you ever surf?
Yeah, no,
Because
never.
it's
Gotta
assumed.
ask.
I'm from New York. Everyone has to surf in Southern California.
Never. I do not like the ocean, actually.
Oh, really?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
But hiking, that's my thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
Nice. Are there a lot of good hikes out there?
Oh my gosh, yes. And where I lived, like literally I could walk out the door in 5 minutes. I'm on a trail.
That's
Oh, wow.
awesome.
Yeah, it was
Nice.
beautiful.
And so how long did you live there for?
I only just moved from California last year.
Oh,
so
really?
my whole life I lived there, and up until I was 25, I just turned 25 at the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Or it was like 25 and a half, whatever.
All
When I moved here. And I moved here for an internship. I always knew I wanted to leave California, but I came here for internship specifically.
All right. You know, California always, I remember, like, you know, I'm a slightly different generation, you guys. That was the place you wanted to go to, especially I'm
Oh,
in New York.
California
Cal-
was the place to
California dreaming, like
Yeah.
the Beach Boys, for love of God.
go to. Hell yeah.
Now everyone's like, I gotta get out of there.
Well, shit, you can't walk out of California now without like spending $100. You know what I mean?
I
It's
get-
so
yeah.
expensive to live there.
I guess so.
I get why people are like, oh shit, I need to get out of here.
Yeah. So what was your childhood like? You know?
Amazing.
Amazing. All right. Right
Yeah,
on.
beautiful. I was really blessed.
See, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents always encouraged deep thinking. They would ask critical questions. Like my mom had this thing where she would say to put your critical thinking cap on if I
Yep.
asked a question, rather than just like giving me answers or feeding me answers. And my dad always, I remember him, I can still hear his voice and how he looked when he'd sit on the edge of my bed and tell me bedtime stories. And they always had some lesson,
That's
usually
awesome.
something he did that he'd be telling me.
Oh, really?
And I didn't know it was about
Yeah.
him until I got older and learned more about him. And I was like, these stories were you.
Yeah.
That's
so-
cool.
You learned about your
Yeah.
dad through stories you didn't realize at the time.
Yes.
Right on.
Yeah, and they took me and my sister traveling everywhere. and they never made us feel like they didn't want kids, you know? So
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
No. But a lot of people struggle with that. That's
My
true.
dad was like, "You're here to mow the lawn, damn it."
Dude, all right,
I love
I
you, Dad.
need to tell this. This is a real story. So, growing up, my dad used to say to me the only reason that he had kids was to change the television channel. And then they came out with remotes, and he was like, shit. And I was like, Dad, that is the worst story, and I'm going to remember this my whole life.
Yeah.
And I still do remember
So
it.
do you know how Mike
He
stayed
said-
around? He would take the batteries out of the remote. Then his dad still needed them.
That's exactly how I still hung
made it
around.
work.
Yeah.
I don't know, but my dad said that to me growing up my entire life. He's like, yeah, and then they came out with remotes, and I was just like, shit. And I was like, Dad, that is so
funny as
horrible. But
That's just why he says, "I love you, son."
yeah, that's his way of showing his love. But I think
Yeah.
that's super funny.
Yeah, I think the generation of parents here are a little more mindful. Not that
Yeah.
the parent, like I knew my parents loved me, but they never used the word. But they were always very supportive. But it was just a funny time. You didn't say those things.
Dude, that's
Yeah.
so funny. They wouldn't never say the "I love you" word. It was
No.
never a thing.
No,
That's a New Yorker thing, dude.
but I
You
knew they
guys
did.
are cold
I knew-
out there.
Yeah,
You guys
Yeah.
truly are cold.
Yeah. You know, I knew they did. Like my dad's way
Of
of saying
course.
love me, he would throw a body shot at me. You know?
Yeah, yeah,
My dad
yeah.
was a pro fighter.
Yep.
Yes.
So but he never did it out of anger. He always he did it out of playfulness. Which I'm like, Dad, Jesus, I'm 10.
Did your family growing up and stuff? I mean, were they all very health conscious individuals, or what kind of was a stepping stone, if you will, to kind of the path that you're on now? Like, did you find yourself more from like a mental health standpoint getting into this information, or is this more like a personal self-development, like weight loss goals or something like that? Like, tell us a little bit about that and family and everything.
Yeah. So if I relate it back to my upbringing, I remember I watched my mom diet a lot. I feel
Okay.
like a lot of women diet constantly. It's
Yep.
an unfortunate reality, but it's true. And so I watched her diet a lot and struggle with her weight, and most of the women in my family did. And I actually, my dad's intention was always really, really positive and pure, but the execution wasn't always
Okay, yeah.
precise.
Yeah.
So and he might watch this, so Dad, you know I love you, and I
No, of course.
put me on
of course.
this path.
I'm
you
sure
know?
he's proud of you. Yeah.
He is,
Yeah.
and
My dad watched all the time. I don't know how to push up my shit.
he's like, I'll punch you again.
yeah.
That's exactly it.
So I remember I was a chunkier kid.
Okay.
Husky, as my dad would say, husky.
Yep.
And I remember not being conscious of that until one time there was this Full House episode where Becky is like, you're super pregnant when you look down and you can't see your toes. And then I was like, I'm not pregnant, but I can't see my toes. Like, what's going on? I'm like 9. How sad, though, that like starting at such a young age, I became so aware of my body.
Conscious of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I also developed a lot faster than other people in my grade.
Okay.
So I was just the bigger girl, and like I definitely got made fun of for being bigger. Like but I will say it made me prioritize other aspects and facets of my life where I was
Yeah.
like, if I can't be the pretty girl who wears the limited 2 and the Abercrombie and Fitch because she doesn't fit it, I'm going to be the smart girl, the funny girl, the athlete. And so then I glowed up and I was like, I'm all of the above. But
Hell yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
yes, but in reality though, like I remember we'd watch like Biggest Loser, and
Yeah.
my dad would be like, that could be you one day, and if it's white, don't bite, and like these little comments that just stuck with me. And I remember my first diet was a bananas and milk diet, and
Really?
yeah,
That
and
doesn't sound like a bad diet.
I know it was actually yummy, but like
Yeah, that does sound like
it
it
doesn't
tastes
really work though.
no,
right?
and the nourishment, like imagine how much I was lacking, like nourishment, and
Yeah.
that's not a kind
proteins,
approach.
etc.
Yeah, and then I just always like dealt with that, and once I got into high school, I really struggled with disordered eating, and
Were you husky in high school, or was this
No,
only in middle
that's
school?
a good question. So the husky phase kind of ended right before 6th grade. I remember I had a growth spurt, but also I was like, I will not be the slowest mile time at school because
Okay,
that's when they
so you
timed
also
you. So that whole summer, I just ran, and I didn't even have anything to worry about. But because I was raised an athlete, which also had a major impact, is I was an athlete through and through, like
Right.
soccer, volleyball, jiu-jitsu.
Oh, right
Hell
on.
yeah.
Yeah, bodybuilding, and then now bodybuilding anyways. But because I had that athlete mentality, I wanted to compete. I didn't want to be the last one in the mile, especially as an athlete. So ran that whole summer, went into it, and I remember getting lean and tall. And then in high school, I started struggling more with like the way that I looked. I was by no means unhealthy or overweight or anything like that. It was here.
More mental,
Yeah. Where most of us are at.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and actually, because like obviously you're the generation. Like when I grew up, there wasn't that much outward photo input except for MTV.
Yeah.
And there were some funny videos, but now it's like that's all that's thrown in you guys' face. Of
That's
images.
all that exists.
Yeah, images. Like we didn't know too much about images. Like every image we saw, like I mentioned earlier in bodybuilding, was Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he didn't make me feel bad because the guy was beyond anybody else you'd ever seen. And now the imagery, it's just like wow, like everyone has a 6-pack ab now, and that's not really realistic in most people's lives.
Absolutely.
And but that wasn't really exposed when I was young as much as it is now.
Dude, it's all over the place now.
But I
And
think
like our kids are starting on screens now. That's the
Yeah.
crazy part. And so, I mean, like what you're talking about that you started to experience in high school, now that's people experiencing that in middle school, you know, and it's getting younger and younger as far as how people are, witnessing, seeing all that type of stuff. Bring it back though to like what you're talking about. So like my family, I've seen a few different family members of mine struggle with weight. Whether it's my sister, my brother, etc. I've always kind of seen that growing up, and kind of witnessed that type of effect. What was your relationship like with like your sister and stuff? Was she going through similar stuff, or was she on her own type of path, or was she always super skinny? Like, tell us a little bit about that dynamic because that helps give the listeners at home an idea.
Yeah, my sister is amazing. She's
Okay.
2 years older than me, and my inspiration.
Hell yeah.
Just always love her and everything she does. She was always an athlete too, actually.
Cool.
And she also struggled with the way that she looked, and I think that was a nurture situation where we both were kind of in this environment of feeling like we had to look differently. And like you said, with the images of whether it's online or magazines or whatever, but I mean, it was like Pussycat Dolls, Gwen Stefani, like you're seeing these bodies where the waist is like this big, and you're maybe comparing or whatever. And my sister did struggle with weight as well. We have different body shapes and sizes, but we're both athletes, so I think being athletes helped us to celebrate our body.
Okay.
Whereas I can imagine a girl who didn't have the athletic potential or the performance would probably not have the gratitude that we also fostered and fed our bodies for. But yeah, she did struggle with it, but she's not into bodybuilding or anything like that now, but she played college volleyball. And
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, wow. All right, so she's a true athlete. All right. Yeah, because that it almost seems like in men and women, we have body issues.
All of us.
All of us. Yeah.
Whatever it is, everybody's got something different, and that's the
yeah.
kind of the funky part about this.
I'm starting to get rid of all the mirrors in my house.
I'm getting rid of all of them.
Yeah.
Getting rid of all my problems.
I'll just have to find a reflection in some pond somewhere.
As far as your sister goes, and like with her background and the sports and like you're talking about the athletics, was that something driven home by mom and dad?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so they were both athletes?
Yeah, they were, and my dad still is. My dad's mountain biker, tennis player.
Okay.
He was an adrenaline junkie, and then my mom was a tennis player. And the thing I love that my mom represented was she's a strong, healthy woman. She always talked about being strong and healthy. She was never like, you need to be skinny or this. I heard those stories. I think it's really sad.
Yeah.
My mom would like try to find people like on Disney Channel. She'd be like, why are all these girls so skinny? They look so look so like not
frail, not healthy.
Yeah. And so my mom would always say, you're so strong, you look so beautiful, it's good to, like all those things. So that wasn't so much of an issue. But yeah, both my parents were athletes, and if we committed to something for athletics and we didn't like it, it didn't matter. It was like, well, you finish what you start. And then they were always supportive. So if I wanted to explore any endeavor in my life, they were fully backing it. It wasn't until I got to like right before middle school when they were like, hey, you're either going to play club volleyball or club soccer, but you're not going to do both. So which one do you want to do? And I was like, club volleyball because my sister played volleyball, and it just like felt right. And so they did make us make a decision, but they did promote athletics throughout our life.
Because I see a lot of people in athletics, in young kids, and they're torn. They're actually doing multitudes of sports. And ever since club came in, because when I was a kid, there was no club. All the clubs were when we were young, like Little League, Pee Wee football. But once you entered to junior high school, it was all school. Now you got school and club. I think the only sport that doesn't have club is football, if I'm not mistaken. It's high school football, period.
Okay.
But you got baseball, basketball. They're all club. So these kids are struggling. But your parents did a good job with saying, no, flip a quarter and choose it.
Yeah, exactly.
And most people go do club because from what I understand now, club is really where the elite athletes go. High school is just something to back up your high school.
Yes, we weren't being recruited from our high school team.
No.
It was like, okay, what club are you playing for? How are you doing? Are you going to the recruiting camps? Are you going to the summer camps? Are you reaching out? Like all of the above. So club was the investment worth taking because you're a more serious athlete. You're likely to get more exposure to possibility. Yeah,
and that's kind of how it is right now. And that probably leads us to all the psychology of this, right? And I know you're in that field. You're a counselor, right?
So, I'm a national certified counselor.
Okay.
Just got my degree in clinical mental health counseling, and I don't foresee myself pursuing licensure here. I don't know what my next step is. This is the first time in my life where I'm saying, just apply. Just apply what you've got. You don't have to go chasing the next thing. So
you don't.
Yeah. So, yes, I am in the field. I completed my internship just a few months ago, and it was so eye-opening, so amazing. Lots of perspective.
Yeah.
Nice for the plug.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So I am, and I have found it's made a profound impact on my view on life and other people, but as well as like the work I do within bodybuilding.
Yeah, and that's really important now because we're at the pinnacle of this because everything's getting stressed out. It's like when my parents were younger, we naturally, my generation came along, we knew we were going to do better. And now we're at this place right now. And the reason this is happening is because you look at the generation of kids like you look at your parents from a monetary, physical, like how much more can you do, right? And it's not about what you do on the outside, it's how you feel about what you do. And that's kind of, and you were talking about this earlier about, is it this or that? And we don't live in a this or that world. We live in a this and that universe.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Like, so with
everybody's looking for black and white. Everybody wants that.
Yeah, and that's what in competition, like you're dealing with, okay, I have to sacrifice this to get that, and I'm like, you don't. That's a belief. That's a myth. And there are people actually doing, and their whole life is fully rounded because I heard the statement. It's like whatever you focus on, the rest of your life falls into place. And a lot of times too is we subsection everything, so we sacrifice this even though it doesn't take any more time, but what we do is we ignore it, and eventually the thing that you love will fall apart. So even if you put your heart and soul into bodybuilding, it will fall apart if you don't give your universal attention to everything at the same time. And we've seen it. I've seen like Ronnie Coleman, sad story.
I don't know that
his story?
No.
Although I don't know if I would say it's sad.
Well,
really?
to some degree, yeah. I know what you're saying. He got into, he was one of the strongest bodybuilders, biggest bodybuilders ever. I think 8 Olympias, right? And now he can barely walk.
Ooh.
So, but yet.
What, he tore himself apart just from exercise?
Well, they say exercise. I think more mental.
Okay.
Because we come out to that, the body can heal itself in different ways. But the thing about him I love, he still doesn't stop.
Right.
The doctors say you can't do this. He's still in the gym working out every day. So he's learning not to listen like he did in the past. I watch a documentary and I see him hear different talks about them. So he's overcoming this belief that if you overdo it, it will harm you. And there's no true evidence to that. Now with epigenetics and the biology and stuff like that, to realize, no, we could replicate continuously. There's no reason we only have to live to 90. We could go beyond that. But it also has to do with changing the mind. But yet the replication of the cadence of how, you must eat this, you must do this, you must get this much sleep. They're realizing it's not that. Although you do that, it's part and parcel of it. It's the mindset that you have in the interim of doing the exercise or whatever it is you're doing. And that's what I like about him too, because he did suffer, but now he's coming out of it mentally, and he's still grinding, the guy.
Yeah, and it's passion. So, like, if you want to subject yourself to a certain amount of pain or challenge in anything in your life, and it's something that you really love and enjoy, it doesn't feel the like pain and challenge that everyone's referring to it as. It's like that's your choice at the end of the day if it fulfills you. And there were times in my last prep where people were like, I can't believe you're doing all that cardio. I can't believe you're pushing yourself this way. And I'm like, okay, and who is it too much to? Too much to you? Because to me, this is what I have to do to get where I want to go, and I'm willing to subject myself to the risks of that, but I'm also willing to subject myself to the lessons and the possibility, and understanding that what we put our bodies through is just building the next version of us. So like every time I challenge myself, I was preparing myself for the next challenge, whereas other people, oh, this is too hard, I'm not going to stop, I'm not going to take it there, it's extreme. But you push past that and suddenly there's a new extreme, because you always want to grow or you always want to pursue more. And I think that's usually a good sign that you're in something you're passionate about if you're willing to subject yourself to that.
And that's just it. And the
Dude,
body,
very well said.
Yeah, and the body actually will, when the body starts to break down, it shows you where your beliefs are. When you shift your beliefs, the body starts to heal. David Goggins talks about this all the time, and people are always getting after him to rest. And it's funny. He's like, I'm resting when I'm running. Stay hard.
But I do think you don't even have to take it from like an exercise standpoint or pushing yourself beyond something physically.
That's right.
You can do that same exact thing mentally. And that's where I think a lot of people, can relate to this type of stuff. Is this doesn't need to be a physical type of, tenacity. No. This is, whatever you're experiencing and going through in life, you can push through, But we tell ourselves, oh, that's too much, or that's too hard, or I saw this person go through that and they failed, or whatever. And so it's I can't. And belief is what we're getting at, guys. Belief.
Yeah, and that's like belief is an interesting thing. I get to a point where I don't believe. I either know or I don't know. And what I don't know is what I dive into.
Hell yeah.
Belief is the thing that holds you back. Belief might be the thing that keeps my time. So, okay, I want to run a mile in, close to 4 minutes. All right. So I go do that. That's a belief. But then I want to break that belief into come into a whole new understanding of knowing. So there's belief, knowing. But the unknowing is where I like to head out every day. And that's where you actually, the body, homeostasis of the body actually replicates itself. But a belief will let you know where your body's at. So we keep breaking beliefs like you're doing, and like mentioned Ronnie Coleman, you keep constantly breaking beliefs. And that's what we came here. We didn't come here to actually believe. We came here to know and head into what we don't know.
So, shameless plug. I have a book called Believe Your Way to Badass.
Nice. Nice. And plug away. That's
why you're on the show.
You're here.
We're not here to keep
Tell
secrets.
us about that.
So I wrote that. Actually, it's coming up on its 6-year anniversary.
What's it called?
Right on.
Believe Your Way to Badass. It
Nice.
is on Amazon.
All right.
Yes, and I bring it up because in that book I break down, like, how do you change your belief systems to then work towards manifesting the version of you want to become. But it's not just fluff. This is the process, and I have this thing called Operation Badass in it, where we're breaking
Hell
things
yeah.
down.
Hell yeah.
Yes, breaking it down from like endpoint to now, and the difference between somebody who really has the confidence and the belief in themselves is competency. Otherwise, you're just an arrogant ass because you
foolish.
Just say you say you can do things and you're gonna do things, but you don't. But if someone's willing to take that step and say, okay, I do believe I can run a mile in this time, or I do believe I can achieve this business goal or whatever, and then they actually take a step and they know that they could absolutely fail. Like this step could be the wrong step. It could be a step, wrong isn't the right word, but it could be a step that isn't the next best
It's not
step.
preferential for the direction.
Right. Yeah. But because they took it, they're already ahead of the person who is just in belief.
Never took that step.
Yes.
And that's really like no one, nobody knows the right thing. We know when we get into the flow of the stream of something, sometimes we have to force ourselves into it. That's what success is. Because I've never met a successful person that didn't fail a million times. I've never have.
There can only be one first place. So when you're like from an athlete perspective, one first place. And then like if you're in business, there can be many of us who are successful. But the level of success we each achieve is unique to us.
Yeah, exactly. Because, depending on in the competition of athleticism, there is that, but there's always someone trying to break it. But what are they trying to break? Like when I'm using David Goggins because he's breaking all these records. He seldom only tells people that he is familiar with, or it won't knock him down, but he doesn't say anything until he does it. And that's what Jesus meant by go forth and tell no one. Because the person who brags about it, I'm like, now you just put an extra weight on your back. Just do it. And then when you talk about what you're doing, now you can talk about the pace and the rhythm in which you did it. And that's what I do when I set a goal. I don't really talk about it. I actually mentally just do it. And when I do it, all of a sudden I don't need to talk about it. Yeah. It's done. It's done. But it's every day. It's something new. And it's really breaking down this barrier. That's what we're doing. There's limitation. We came here in a very limited world. It's got gravity. It's got schools.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It's constant stimulation. It's this or that. It's black or white. We grow up learning a bunch of funky stuff, and this,
but I think it's part and parcel of the whole. It's an obstacle course. I don't want a flat, nice rubbery track to run on. I want obstacles. I really do. I thrive off of that. I don't want it easy. I want it hard. I want it difficult because I want to love the difficulty of life, not run from it.
Did you have to learn your type of mindset? Like who or what got you kind of on that path of knowing, your capabilities and just overall being able to kind of dive into this? It's not easy to get rid of the self-talk and the doubts that come up. How did you work through that?
I think it was, I was, like I said earlier, I was blessed with like really amazing parents and they encouraged everything I did. I think I probably would have had a more difficult time getting to this place if I had parents who were always pushing me down, let's say. They were building me up. I wanted to be an entrepreneur from the moment I knew I could do something I love and make money doing it and live this way. And my parents were actually entrepreneurs too, but
nice.
They like supported me. So like if I had an idea, they're like, okay, if you have this idea and you want to pursue it, then you have to commit to it, go fully all into it, and then don't quit until it's done.
Hell yeah.
So they fostered a lot of that in me. And then being an athlete, you learn so much about.
That's where your drive, really starts to.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, so being an athlete helped encourage me to like continue to show up even when maybe it wasn't your best game, it wasn't the best play, learning to let go of the mistake rather than carry it into the next one. And it gave me this tenacity because I wanted so badly to be the best, which, a lot of our best qualities can tend to be our not so great qualities.
Yeah.
So that came back and got me a few times. Actually, I think that maybe contributed burnout, but we could talk about that later with the all or nothing and everything. But so that made an impact on the mindset. And it was when I was in high school, I was starting to struggle a lot with depression and anxiety. And actually the anxiety was the root. It was coming from the depression. I was so scared of this darkness in me. I was so scared. I never knew when to expect it. And I would have really scary thoughts. I had attempted suicide actually. And when I was in the moment of about to attempt, I should say, I felt this intense God-like. I honestly do believe it was God telling me, no, like there's something more for you.
That's your higher self, absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't know. Yes, I had no idea what that more was, but I knew I was meant for more. And throughout my life,
how old were you then?
That was 14.
Okay, so young.
Yeah, I was young.
Now, did you talk to your parents about this, or?
So I did.
Right.
I told them like what happened, and they were like, "Okay, well, like." Talk to us if this comes up again. And I wanted therapy at the time. I thought that could be of benefit to me, but that didn't end up being provided. Right. I found my therapy in the gym, which ended up
good for you.
It's good. It's
hey,
good
you gotta do something.
Got it exactly. So but it actually presented through the disordered eating and through running myself to the ground. It was something I could control, right? And it gave me a focus, and I wanted to be the best athlete I could be. And I had gone through a silly high school breakup that made me want to be better as well. I was like, I will not cheat myself. I will expect respect from myself. I will give to myself, and then I will be able to demand that even more from others because I'll know I deserve it and I'm worthy of what I want, which has been an ongoing theme in my life. And then
an ongoing theme in all of our lives.
Yes.
That's what we're all honestly working on.
Well, that's part, like setting a standard for yourself to meet.
That's it.
And the cool thing is when you set that standard, you meet that standard, your partner will be there.
Yep.
You know, that's the thing is, like, never lower your standard. But like I was talking to one of my clients, and she has these high standards.
Mm-hmm.
But the question I asked her, I'm like, would you date yourself?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have to get to that standard in order. Like, if you want to date someone from the 4th floor and you're living on the 2nd floor, you have to get in the elevator to go to the 4th floor.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect that 4th floor person to even meet you, let alone date you, right? And it's so we're doing it for everything that we do is never for others, it's for us. But we then express it, like the love I have for my wife is my expression of my love. And now I hold myself responsible holding that. But if I have to give it to her based on how she did something to me, this is where the argument.
Well, that's where a lot of the relationships are. It's like hey, you take care of me when I need you, and I'll take care of you when and it's like no. We're here to amplify each other.
Yeah.
We're not. I'm not here to take care of you, just like you're not here to take care of me. And that's where a lot of this,
but we support,
this divorce and stuff comes from.
Yeah, we support. I support her by staying at the level I'm at, because like if someone fell off a boat, and I know this because I've been on boats my whole life, I don't jump in the water because we're both going to drown. Because to get back on a big boat, you can't. So I sit there and encourage them to come closer. I throw them a life raft, but I stay and I remain where I'm at. That's the only way you're going to get the person out of the water. But if I jump in, we're going to argue until we drown, and that's what happens. So we have to maintain that status in which we hold, and we keep rising. And that's what a relationship is. I got in one with her. I've been married twice before, and I've always on this excelling elevation. Sometimes extreme, but I didn't discuss that with my partner at the time. With Karen, I discuss it all the time, and we're constantly moving on to that level. So we're constantly supporting each other, and that's key, because I don't want to slow down. And I have my own pace. She has her own pace, but our paces are very mutual and in different areas. But yeah.
Well, and you each love yourself. That's important. If you don't have it, if you don't love who you are, to expect love from another, it's non-existent. It's fleeting. It's a constant chase. Yeah. You really have to love yourself before you can get into any type of relationship or any type of relationship you really want to experience. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this experience that we call reality, we are very much so participating in it. And so if there's no true concept of self-love or gratitude for your experience and who you are, how can you expect to experience that through another, at least genuinely? And that's hard. Yes.
And sometimes I think people hear self-love and they're instantly like, well, I'll never love myself, or I don't know how that looks, and they maybe didn't even know, they didn't have an experience of love either, which is unfortunate and sad, and so fostering that can be more difficult. But I think when you accept yourself and where you're at and where you're going, and you have a vision and you are excited about that, and then someone else expresses the excitement for you, it's easier to receive that. Whereas if you're like, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm to this, or well, then if someone else is like, I love those things about you, there's already going to be a wall up. And I think that it can get through, because there's a lot of people who don't love themselves, and there's a lot of people in relationships anyways.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think it can get through. But like you were saying, that reliance on each other, it creates codependency. Yeah. And codependency is not a place to have a functioning, healthy relationship.
It's not sustainable. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because we're looking for sustainable life in a fleeting world. It's really, we live in a fleeting world.
Yep.
But there is an actual sustainability within us. That's the witness in us that will never change. It knew what you were in 8th grade. It knows what you are now. That never changed. That's the part we're tapping into. And then the character of us, the emoji of us, we want to make it match that feeling.
Yes.
So that's what we're constantly developing it. But there's something in me, there's something in Mike, there's something in you that's never going to change. It's the witnesser of it all, the whole thing. That's how we're able to tell stories.
Yep.
Without that, you couldn't tell a story. You'd only be looking at what's in front of us.
That's really our main goal with this show, is helping people see that, or helping people realize that they can be the observer of life passing by. They don't need to attach to their character. I'm not that person, that was an experience, that that taught me more about who I am, or remember, how powerful I am, etc. When you can detach from the constant narrative of, this is who I am, this is where I came from, this is all I'm ever going to be, etc. We're putting ourselves really in this tight little box, and we're infinite beings. We're not just these stories that we've held for 20, 30, 40 years and say, oh, this is who I am. A lot of people, when they go out and start dating, or they're afraid to date, is because like they go out and they think, I need to tell this person about all of my trauma. And you don't. You do not need to sit here and word vomit on them and tell them about all your past experiences. These people are carrying, and I see this like with my brother a lot. He'll be talking with me, and like he feels like anytime he needs to talk to a girl, he needs to like, they need to know where I'm at. And I'm like, no, they don't. Your body language, yourself, how you interact, you're going to tell them exactly where you're at, And he like has these stories like where he thinks like, oh, I'm that person. And I'm like, no, you're not. That is something you experienced and went through. Yeah. It doesn't mean that's who you are. And so when he and I talk about these concepts, it's very much from like a perspective of, yes, I've experienced this, but this isn't who I need to continue to be. It's not the character I need to continue to play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but like Celeste said, you have to accept that moment in order to get there.
100%.
If you don't accept where you're at, you'll never get anywhere. It's like if you want to go somewhere, you have to know where you are to get there.
Yeah.
GPS knows where you are, but if it didn't know where you were, you couldn't get anywhere. You wouldn't know how to get to the point in which you want to go.
Well, that's the self-validation piece, because if you can acknowledge the emotion that you have, understand where it's coming from, now you've opened up the one thing humans have that sets apart from other beings, which is insight. Yeah. So we can now reflect and say, wow, what a blessing. I have the insight to move forward with this new knowledge or new experience. And the point about not labeling yourself is really key, because I do believe right now the world wants to label everything, which can't blame them for it, because mentally, our brains do function in categories. That's why when you're a kid and you see a furry dog and you learn it's a dog, but you see a cat, you're going to call it a dog because you didn't know cats existed. And then you form a new category to put something in. So we live to have categories. We live to put people in boxes, including ourselves. But do we need to identify as something like, yes, I'm a competitor. Yes, I'm a business owner. But when I say that, someone else perceives whatever expectations or standards come with it. But that doesn't mean that's my expectation or standard. No. So like,
great point.
Yes, it's like you could say you're a husband. Well, to someone out there, they're like, oh, like, so you basically do everything for your wife and you give her everything you have and you've lost yourself.
This is a new age in days. I don't do that. No, I'm kidding.
I don't have to do that.
She does that. I sit on the couch and eat Cheetos.
No, but great point. That's not exactly how you feel. Like how I see what a husband is not exactly what you see a husband as.
Exactly. No, yeah, and that's how everything.
We can only see people from the perception we have.
Well, so. We realized this. We talked about this. This came up, in entanglement, and that's this quantum physicist that actually just won the Nobel Peace Prize for finally solidifying this idea of entanglement. So entanglement comes from the singularity understanding when two things are entangled. So right now, there's 8 billion people on the planet. It's one mind having 8 billion different viewpoints. So the point I bring this up is, I now no longer do that because that is me. In Mike's clothing. You are, over there in your clothing. So why would I criticize it? I want to learn from it, not compare myself to it. If I had to compare myself to Mike, I don't need Mike because I already am that. So in the idea of shifting perspectives all the time is what expands this universe. And all of a sudden people are starting to compete and over intellect and other things. I'm like, this is ridiculous. No one knows everything. The smartest people that are deemed to be the smartest will be like, this is as much as I know thus far. Yeah. And they continue on. Because all it is, you're a concept of my inner being. And Mike's a concept of my inner being. And vice versa. And when we come to understand that, judgment flees. Thou shalt not judge. I'm like, okay, I understand that part now. I really do, because I can't judge. I don't know enough to judge at all. Yeah. Even myself.
I like how Celeste, you were mentioning, you are aware that's how the mind works. And that level of awareness is like true maturity. And this is where a lot of people struggle is the categorizing of the mind and how the mind works. We're not taught that growing up. So we think we are that and we identify. So as this crazy brain, this instrument, this tool that we have is categorizing things as short, small, fat, big, whatever, we are associating saying, I am the thinker. These thoughts are me. And it's detaching from those thoughts, detaching from the thinker and going, wait, no, that's how this instrument functions. I can observe all of this. That space that you're talking about, that's where real growth happens, in my opinion, because that's when you can see, okay, I am not the thoughts. I'm not the characterization. I'm aware of what the brain is doing. I'm aware of how the mind works. I'm aware that the brain likes to categorize, put things into boxes, measure, judge, etc. And then when those feelings come up, we can no longer judge, no longer measure. And this is where we begin to grow, because now we're starting to flow with life. Mm-hmm. Now it's no longer, okay, I'm measuring, I'm judging, etc. You're aware of what that measurement and judging is, and you start to use it as a tool in your toolbox rather than think you are that. I know when I realized, that I was not identifying with my thoughts, it allowed me the space that I needed in order to detach fully.
Yeah. Hence why you coach.
Yeah.
So let's walk us through, if you can, because I know everything's different. Like, how do you approach a coaching? Say someone, obviously in bodybuilding, they're struggling with diet, or whatever. Like, how do you present yourself to them? Like, how do you get them to see what you know?
Yeah.
Because that's really what a real coach does.
My goal is to help them understand where they want to go and whether or not that's possible for their goals, and if they can accept the process and outcome might look different because of what they want. So I don't help people with their diet. I don't help people with their training, although that is how I started. I don't do that. Now it's all mental. It's all psych.
Right on.
And thank you.
Yeah,
and
yes.
I got plenty of coaches I can refer them to. That's not I'm the mental coach. I'm going to help you get the most out of your programming.
Yeah.
So I like to help people to establish an understanding of intention, because intention is really everything. We could look at a bodybuilder and say they're disordered. Well, according to these, outline criteria, but it's the intention that matters. If they're coming from the right place, if they're coming from that passion, if they're coming from a purpose, it's not a disorder, because it's not taking away from their life, which is the distinction. And I want them to have the empowerment and the fulfillment throughout their journey to have longevity. And a lot of the times they think, I have to do it like so-and-so. I have to be this way. If I want to be the best bikini competitor, I have to be like Miss Bikini Olympia, and I have to follow her exact process. But they stunt their growth. They stunt their progress. And I honestly think it's a lack of respect for the process when you're expecting yourself to be like somebody else, to execute in a way someone else did, because you haven't yet learned or earned that ability.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone has their own roadmap. So if I was following your road, like I tell Mike this, anyone in the world can go to San Diego. But if you follow my roadmap and you live in New York, you're going to get really lost. So I can never follow somebody else's path. I can look at their trajectory. I can look at the fact they got to San Diego. But I have to develop my own roadmap. And that's what the process you're teaching people is, to create your own roadmap and see where it takes you.
Right.
And then keep going and keep going and keep going.
That's exactly it.
Keep writing that map.
Yes, and be okay with it changing.
Yeah.
Like the direction might change. There might be a traffic jam. There might be something that comes up in the road. You got to be okay with it. And yes, success leaves clues. Yes, we can learn. Hence why I talk to these people who have achieved success, and we can learn right from whatever their witness has experienced. But when I talk to someone who's struggling with their relationship with food, who's binge eating, who's going off their diet plan, who's not able to commit to their prep, who hasn't been able to have a successful reverse diet, as we would say, or they are constantly judging their body, they're having difficulty how they perceive themselves when they look in the mirror after change, I equip them with knowledge as well. So I do a lot of psychoeducation, like, well, this is what's happening with body image, and this is what food relationship, and I teach them mindfulness-based eating strategy. So a lot of what I do is based in research and knowledge and background. That's what sets me apart, honestly, a lot of the time. Well, and I'm one of really the only person doing what I do, but I say, I want to be the best at what I do because I'm the best, not because I'm the only, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is backed with a lot of education, research, etc. But then also we take these tools and we say, well, what's your interpretation? How are we going to apply it to your life? And are you willing to try it? Because a lot of what I have people do, it's going to be different. Well, obviously, because if you want a different result, you got to do something differently. So they'll question, maybe they'll be concerned, they'll have fear. But because they want to change it, they want to have more longevity, they want to change the way that they approach food and their body image, they're willing to take that step. And I meet them where they're at. I'll never say, you must do this or you need to do that. It's like, well, where's your threshold of, you know, commitment? Where's the hierarchy of, let's say, fear that we're going to be working with as well? So we can make proper progressions in exposure. And then what is it that you actually want at the end of this? Because if we fast forward, let's say 8 weeks, because I have a lot of different services, but my most popular is my 5-week food relationship program. I'm like, let's say we fast forward at 8 weeks and you were to look back, what would you need to see is different to know that you made progress? And now we're opening them up to have their own interpretation of what's a healthy relationship with food within the act of also pursuing your goals. So it's managing expectations, it's understanding that the commitment's going to look different, and it's making peace with the fact that their process might now look different than what they always expected it to be. But if it sets them up for that long-term success, then technically it is the better process, even if it is different.
Yeah, and that's how, because I think, I forgot what athlete just said this. Obviously the person's retired. But they realized they had these goals, but they realized the goal was the process, and they didn't know it. And this is why we do it. We set forth, because I tell people the goal isn't out there, the goal is here. The process is what we experience. So it's like when you find a book, you read a book, the book is already written. I have to now read it. I have to enact it. And we each 8 billion people on the planet have our own book. We came in with our own book. We came in with this idea. Whether you know this or not, we signed a contract, so to speak. But, like, why don't we remember? I'm like, well, an actor doesn't remember the role because they only got the script. They didn't act it out yet. And that's what we're doing. And that's why the process itself is the goal. People are trying to get through the process. Like, no, the process is the goal. You know, there's a time you have to take a knee and take a breath. You got to, like...
That's part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
seriously.
also, too, because we are subject... In the duality of the world, people are trying to, and this is part of what I teach people, they only want to move towards the light. I'm like, no, you got to actually become familiar with the dark, because contrast is the only thing that makes us survive here. So a lot of athletes, and you probably experience this, you get dark with your workouts, but that's when the greatest light came in. But you mentioned this earlier, on the moment in time when you were trying to enact or thinking about suicide, that's when the greatest light came in. So there's something about understanding, be comfortable with the dark, because in the dark you can see the smallest light, and that's where it blows up, and then move towards the light. It's a continuous repetition, because in the physical world with duality is a crest and a trough, and that's life. It never ends. But when you like the process, you're fucking gonna love life. But if you don't, it's like, what the is going on?
What's going on?
And
This
I
isn't supposed to be like this.
spent a lot of my life that way, because a lot of, like, I would have really good success, and that comes down. I'm like, where did I go wrong? I'm like, you didn't go anything wrong. In order to get to a higher plane, the physics of momentum need to get up. I need that. I have to bend my knees to jump up higher to the place in which I want to be. So I no longer avoid the dark. I actually bring it on. I don't avoid the light either. That's the candy at the end of the day. So
that's it.
Yeah.
So Celeste, what do you see the majority of your clients kind of struggling with? What's the common theme? Because clearly it's going to be some sort of self-talk, some sort of like head chatter, you know? Is that very common? Like, is that where you feel, when do people get the most out of working with you? Is it when that kind of clicks for them?
I think they get the most out of working with me when they accept that what they want out of this process is actually something they can have while still achieving their goals. That's when it kind of clicks for them. That
so you let them know they're perfect where they are, in a sense.
In a sense,
absolutely,
like we're
exactly where we should be.
Yeah.
Yes, and like when they accept that, like maybe they're binging and it's emotional eating, and that's the best way they've ever learned how to cope. So it's okay. You know, you're not a failure for that. Or maybe they're binging because they've just restricted for so long. Well, that's your body doing its best to support you. Or maybe they change the way that they perceive food. It's no longer the good, bad, the black, white, the can't have this, must have that. We remove a lot of the labels and the rules to establish and promote more pragmatic, balanced thinking, where you can be both a competitor who's, well, here, I guess I should back up a little bit. Some people will say, I'm a competitor on prep. And so that comes with these beliefs. Like, that means I'm perfect in this way, and I do this, and I'm always doing that. But then they realize, like, they're having a difficult time committing to it. So I help them to break through that and see, like, it's okay to be the competitor on prep who right now the best thing you can do is these 3 habits. Because once you commit to that, you'll grow into the next. And it's okay to be a competitor who struggles post-show. It's actually really common. Like, it's not abnormal. So there's a lot of shifts that occur, but I think at the root of it, it's them coming to terms with the fact that, like, they're allowed to want the process that they want, as long as they can accept the pace of that process, the result, and if they're willing to still push their threshold in it. Because we have to accept too that in order to get where we want to go as a result, like whether that's physical and how it presents, or it's mental, or it's in life, like you do have to push a limit. You do have to establish new boundaries and new expectations. But it's an easier and better process when you're actually enjoying it. And if you were to stop everything tomorrow, you know, you would want to be able to say, I enjoyed yesterday, or I enjoyed this moment here right now, because that is what's ultimately informing our experience. So it no longer is about, I have to be number 1 on stage, or I have to look a certain way on social media, or I have to achieve XYZ. It's now like, I'm really, really happy with this process, so much so that regardless of if I ever get the outcome, this meant more. Like, this was more important. And when you can establish that level of, like, respect for your process and respect for what you want, then the outcome is irrelevant, and also I think more inevitable, because
it is.
now you're going to commit longer.
Very well said. And yeah, I mean, at the crux of it, acceptance.
Yeah.
Like that's so important. You know, we don't want to don't want to allow ourselves to feel good until we have it. And we've been like taught that our whole lives, like, oh no, I can't feel good yet. Like, I haven't accomplished it, or I haven't done it. And you're saying, you know, no, you need to accept and get into that entire process. Through that process, then you'll find, you know, inevitably what you're looking for.
And do you find you have to explain, because within the process, it's interesting, because like I talk about this with people as well. There's this inertia, what I call G-force experience, and people think there's something wrong with that. I'm like, if you're in an airplane taking off and you feel the G-force, it means you're going to the vacation in which you want to go. There's always going to be a spot of what we call discomfort. But that discomfort means you're doing the right thing. But there is a discomfort when you're doing the wrong thing too. So you have to distinguish what's the difference, right? Because every elevation of altitude always brings on a change of oxygen level. But if I'm hiking up a mountain and my breathing goes south, I don't run down the mountain. I just wait for my red blood cells to pick up. I oxygenate my body, now become acclimated, and I keep going. It's the process. But how do you teach people the difference between the elevation of discomfort, which is accelerating, and discomfort that's diminishing? Because that's a part a lot of people struggle with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if they quit, do they go for something of equal demand on their mind, or do they go for something of lesser demand? If they're going for something of equal demand, it really was about the thing they were pursuing that they didn't like. So we know that if someone's like, I'm going to become an artist, and then they quit after a month because of whatever reason, and then they try something just as demanding and hard at the same level of skill set, and they like that better, it was not because art was too hard. It was because they didn't like it. So
wasn't a path.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you quit something, commit to something that's just as difficult and demanding, so you can figure out why you actually quit. Because if you run down the mountain, you would probably always wonder, like, could I have finished? Could I have finished that hike? Could I have gotten to the top? And especially because you'd be trading it in for something easier, which is to give up. But let's say you were actually like in a medical emergency where it wouldn't be smart to push yourself.
Yeah, that'd be at the end of me on the mountain.
That's different, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, you can trust your body cues, you can trust those signals. You know yourself, but there's like this voice I think that comes on in our head when we are about to quit because it's difficult, where it's like a justification wants to come out. It's a justification where it's like,
absolutely,
oh, I can quit because then this, or I'm not able to do. So I think pay attention if you hear or feel like a little bit of a, I think that's what makes it an excuse, is like we want to justify it. If you feel that or you hear that, know that you got to push a little further. Like I made this video one time that got like all this flack because I was telling people, telling's not the right word, but I was encouraging people to push themselves, if they want to quit at 1 minute before that treadmill goes out, or they're thinking about lowering the speed, they got to bump it up more. They got to push further. And people are like, you're telling other people to put their health at risk because of this. I'm like, this is why you guys are not athletes. And
correct.
Because you don't love it so much that you demand more. And you have to want the work. You have to want the work as much as you want to win.
Yeah, you know why people do that though? Because you make them feel inadequate.
Well, it's easier
they want to be where you're at, but they want to get there in a simpler way. I'm like, the process is the way.
Yeah,
it's different. It's obviously different for everybody else, and it's really interesting. I find people that they'll do that, but what it is they're misunderstanding what you're talking about completely. Because you're not telling people to kill themselves.
You're not saying hurt yourself or push yourself beyond a place you can go. No. You're saying don't listen to that voice.
Yeah, because
the voice that you commenters are listening to, that's not you. That's the ego. And when you can clear that ego, that's when you start breaking through to these next levels that you're talking about.
It's like taming the mind. We don't want the mind to control us. We want to control the mind.
What's the saying? The mind's a great servant, but a poor master.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
Or the ego.
Yeah, the ego.
And that's the ego's always trying to get on the couch to eat Cheetos,
Well, that's also more acceptable in society than.
Yeah.
Great point too. There's so much around like what's acceptable on like social media and society and just the news and stuff like that. And like it's okay to just give in and whatever. Like it's all good. That's like this weird like new thing that's been coming around where it's like, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, then, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, no, what it is, it's not a new thing, but they taken actually a concept that's actually built into laws, and they translated it poorly is what they did. So you're teaching people how to love themselves, but
still, not at the expense of being better.
No, exactly. But still, what happens when you love yourself, we know this in physics. My amplitude picks up. My torus gets bigger. When my torus gets bigger, what happens? I have more energy outside the aspect of food and caloric intake. So you're going to want to run that extra mile.
Yep.
So you actually get into the state, and then, so that's what you're teaching people is how do I get into that state? When you get into that champion mind state, it's easy to do that thing. Yes, the altitude change, and you have to get familiar with it. Because I could sit there and get excited, like when you watch Rocky come up from the bottom and get to the top, you get excited about it, but like now you got to do the work, and that's where the fun is. It's in doing the work, because the amplitude of getting higher is the plateau place, and people think it's leveling down. But if I use this analogy all the time, but in order for me to get on the freeway, I have to amplitude get my RPMs up to about 4,000, 5,000, and I get up to about 80 miles an hour. But once I'm at 80, they drop. But they think the excitement went away. The excitement didn't go away. This is the work now. I'm like, I didn't go down to 40 miles an hour. I stayed at 80, but I'm using less energy. Because if I stayed excited, I'm going to blow something in my physical body. But people often think that the RPMs drop, therefore my energy dropped. Like, no, that's just a mindset. Now your energy did drop. You have to use that energy at that level, because I want the car to be moving at 80 miles an hour at just under 2,000 RPMs. And then when I go higher, I have to rev it up again. So the revving up part, where people get excited, is the moment where it opens up their field of thought and understanding. But then the next day they wake up and it dropped down. They misunderstand it. I no longer have it. I'm like, no, now you got to do the work. This laid out the plan. This get you excited for it. But now you can't stay excited all the time.
You can't exist for the excitement either.
No.
You got to exist for just the execution and enjoying that and knowing it's a habit. Like, having gratitude for what the routine brings to your life versus chasing that feeling of how it feels when you're like, I'm going to start Monday, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to, like, that's a huge hit of dopamine, and eventually it will crash. And I think that the maintenance level, a lot of people don't prioritize just contentedness in life. Contentedness is a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And it allows you to exist at like a baseline versus a super high and a super low. So people will chase a super high and then they can't maintain it because they're expecting too much. So then they go to a super low, and it's this. But if we can say like, okay, let's take you up, let's establish a little bit closer to baseline. What's that feel like? Remember this feeling. Okay, have you exceeded baseline? Yes. What's that feel like? Okay, now we know what triggered that. This is what triggered it. Okay, so maybe we know this action or behavior or thought could help get us up when we're here. But what's this feel like? So if you know what your spectrum looks like, then you're able to regulate. And then if you have respect for like the routine you've developed and you enjoy it, and maybe you bring gratitude to it. Like, this is another thing. If you're a competitor eating a lot of the same things, or if you're anybody even on a gut health diet or whatever it might be, or you're going to the gym every day, bring that energy of compassion and love and excitement. So like, thank you, body, for digesting this amazing meal for like the 100th time this month, you know? Or like, thank you, body, for supporting me in this workout and to push myself. And that self-love, which you brought up, that encourages action. So when you love yourself, you want to nourish yourself. You want to rest. You want to push yourself. You want to do these things that will inspire a different version of you. And that's why I think, too, it's really unfortunate that people are promoting the message of like, don't push yourself. Don't do this. You're fine as you are. You're perfect. It's like, well, if you want to believe you're perfect and everything that you want, you don't have to actually go for, you're going to hold yourself back. And humans are built to strive. And yet we're being told not to strive for more. And I think that's really unfortunate, because that's where we become more. That's where we experience more. And when, you know, people are saying these extremes of like, you're either doing everything, you're doing nothing, or don't pursue more or whatever, it's a very limiting mentality. It's a very limiting way to live. But it's easier because extremes we can understand. We can understand when someone says, do not do this or do this. But if we say, well, you could try this, or have you considered that? Or what if your baseline was here instead of there? And how would it feel if now we're opening up a whole other world that requires critical thinking, application, potential for failure, resistance that we now have to address, darkness we have to face. So it's easier to have an extreme than it is to go through that.
I'm glad you bring that up, Celeste, because like that's what you're talking about right there. Is where a lot of people, that critical thinking, you know, thing, I think that's where people get hung up and stuck. So since we're kids, we go to school and we're conditioned, you know, from a very early age. We're told what to think. We're told this is right and this is wrong. We're told, you know, all these different things. We're not really given these. People talk about, oh, go to school, create critical thinkers. We're not really doing that. In fact, we're handed a book and we're told these are the right answers, these are the wrong answers. There's going to be a test at the end. You don't want to fail, because failures, you know, they don't move on, they don't succeed, and that's what we're taught growing up. So we don't ever have that ability to critical think that you're talking about. And so we start developing. Then we get to the age where it's like, okay, you graduate high school, you can either go to college, start your own life, whatever. But we've gone now 17, 18 years with no critical thinking, right? And now we're expected to critical think. And this is where we have why people have these pitfalls and issues and mistakes. I've never been a failure. I've always been top of my class, all this type of stuff. But that doesn't translate into this reality or this working world or whatever you want to call it. And so a lot of people get hung up there is they want yes or no because they've had that for 17 or 18 years.
I was reading a study several years ago. I think it was at Stanford University. I forgot her name. She was a professor there. And she would offer these papers. And it first happened by accident. But she had them write a thesis on, I don't know if it was their own philosophy or whatever. And a lot of students were like, well, how many pages? And she goes, like, just write it. I don't care if it's a paragraph or not. These kids couldn't get over the fact that they didn't give her.
They didn't have a number of assignments.
Is it 30 pages or 20 pages? She goes, make it up for yourself. And she realized the angst in these kids. Like, my God, like, if you could tell it in a paragraph, great. If you need 20 pages, great. They couldn't get over it. It was just a very interesting. I would have done it in a paragraph.
That's how that's how we've been taught.
I would have written an 11-page paper on my life.
Well, that's it. I was gonna say some people are gonna write a novel, and some people are gonna, you know.
And it is very interesting because when I grew up, we actually were taught critical thinking, or the world allowed us, because my generation, we left the house early in the morning. Our parents had no idea where we were.
Right.
And when I talk about critical thinking, like, there's a funny story. I remember one time I gashed my knee bad on my bike, and I came home and my mom bandaged me up because of putting her out of cleaning the house. I had to stay in. It was like freaking 2:00 in the afternoon. So I couldn't leave the house. So the next time I did that, me and my friends cleaned it up ourselves.
Yeah.
We literally went to the store, cleaned it up. So it was critical thinking because, well, I don't want to be stuck in it. My mom is pissed when I come home hurt. I'm like, so I cleaned it up myself and took care of it. So we learned how to do that stuff. So everything wasn't given to us. We would just, here, do this. But it sounds like your coaching is that.
Yeah,
Here.
I don't want to.
No.
Yeah.
Do this, do that every day. And I'm like, no.
Not how it works.
That's going to drive you mad, And to add to what you're talking about, the discomfort, I believe that if you don't push yourself, it's actually more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because in the world today, we know this. If you choose your discomfort, you expand. If you don't, you may or may not expand. And what I mean is there's a lot of things that no one would choose to do, but they grow from it. But sitting on the couch, how long can you sit on the couch before you're uncomfortable? And like asking
everybody's been there too.
You're gonna get
People think they want to
bed
relax
sores after a while. No, it's not. It's very uncomfortable. I'm not even talking about the mind. I'm talking about the physical. Just sitting there. I'm like, for the love of God, I can't sit on the couch for that long. And everyone has their own pace. I don't follow anyone else's pace but mine. I've learned that. But people often ask me, "What do you do? How much you do?" I'm like, it's not what I do. It's how I feel about what I do. And I know how to get into that state every day. Am I there every day? Hell no. But that's the fun. The fun is like, why do you think we do these breathing exercises? So to get into the state.
One question I have for you, Celeste, that you brought up earlier, you had like kind of briefly mentioned. So growing up, I mentioned, like I watch people like my brother struggle with his weight and stuff. And there were certain comments that my dad would make to him that he still holds like to this day. And I can even still see him like kind of wrap his head around, certain things. And my dad's a great guy, like always has been, good dad, good provider, all that type of stuff, and never had like a malicious intent. But it was very similar to like the comments you were talking about, like that your father had made. And clearly your father had no malintent or anything like that. But my God, did you hold on to that? And I know that my brother did.
What would your dad say?
Well, just like little things, like that could be you one day. If it's somebody like losing weight or something like that. Like a Biggest Loser type of situation. And never was it like mean, but it was like I could see how it could be misconstrued. And I've watched my brother, kind of take this, his whole life. And kind of develop like an animosity, like an anger towards my dad, like like, oh, if you wouldn't have said that, this never would have happened to me, a very victim mindset type of thing. And so I'm sure you see that a lot, and you've experienced that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, how do you explain that to clients? Because that's a key point.
Well, that's something a lot of us go through at home, and just
Yeah.
And clearly your dad had, like, how were you able to be mature enough and have enough wisdom and awareness to say, I forgive my father. I know that's not how he meant it.
My dad was right.
Yeah,
that's another thing we have to get over. My dad was right. I could be that person, so to speak.
Exactly.
That should not be looked at as.
We like take things really personal, and you were able to detach from that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I had more evidence to support the belief that my dad had good intentions than not.
Okay.
So
it's easy for you?
Yeah,
yeah, as easy as it can be.
Yeah, I think,
just because you're showing a map doesn't mean you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was easy to know he had good intentions because he's my dad and I'm so close with him and I love him to death, and like I don't know what I would do without him, and his influence in my life is extremely positive. So I wasn't always thinking like, if my dad hadn't said this or that. It just stood out to me. And like I said too, like kids would say mean things at school, and even up until high school, I always, like, I had big legs. I was a volleyball player. People. I also think that comes with other things, as far as comparison, jealousy, etc. But even in high school, like being yelled at across the school and being called thunder thighs or whatever, I was not.
Isn't that fun? What's funny now though, like from an aesthetic standpoint.
Yeah,
that's very
desirable.
Admired.
Yeah,
very desirable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I even
every woman I go to the gym, like, what are you working at? Glutes and legs. That's it.
That's
like,
it.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, exactly. But
it goes with the trends.
And I learned a lot about like how I personally felt, and I realized like, okay, what somebody else is saying to me or what they perceive of me isn't actually how I feel, because I was like, I'm learning to like my legs because they're strong.
Yeah.
But that shift happened when I took personal responsibility.
Yes. I love this. I was hoping you'd get to that, because
Yes.
this is we're taking our power back now.
Exactly. So by taking personal responsibility for my choices, that means I was no longer blaming anything or anyone except for myself. And like, okay, for example, with bodybuilding, I did my very first show and then I quit, and I was that jaded competitor that was like, bodybuilding creates eating disorders and bodybuilding makes you. And then I was like, now wait a minute, Celeste, hold on. You had these issues before bodybuilding. Bodybuilding was just your crutch to be why you would say no or why you weren't doing things. It was just an added layer of control. But if I hadn't stepped back and take that personal responsibility, I would still be struggling today because I'd be looking for something to blame. And we see this a lot. Oh, it's my job, it's my employer, it's the judges, it's my relationship. Well, now none of these things would exist if you weren't alive and breathing. So you're playing a role in it.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
right? Yeah.
so what is your role? And yeah, there are times where we have to set those boundaries, or people aren't speaking to us properly, or we are going through something and it's not necessarily all on us. And that's where boundary setting comes in, and understanding who you want in your life. But you have to first be responsible.
Yeah. Because that, even like with the boundary settings, that teaches us to how did I get here in the first place? And that's kind of like the idea of like walking down an alleyway with my money flashing out, no one should rob me. Well, yeah, like the person who robs you should be fully incarcerated to the extreme. But then you ask yourself, why was I doing that? So when you are, and that's what I do, like, okay, yeah, the person said something, but how was I in that position to get dinged like that? That's the inside question I ask all the time. And then when you do, it's interesting, the things that like people screaming at you when you like thunder thighs, whatever, no one's doing that anymore. Because you're so far up here, no one is anywhere near it. But I think there's always that place that we always want to take to the next level. And that's what you like, your base level. You talk about the base level. Your base level keeps moving. So what I always focus on myself and other people, I'm like, where were you, and if you want to use time fashion, where were you 5 years from now when you were here? How would you be thinking? That's success. And people don't look at it that way. I'm like, you know, I remember talking to Karen one time, we were arguing over something. It was like 5 minutes. It's like, you think we'll ever never argue? I'm like, no, but know this, 5 years ago, the argument lasted a day. I'm like, we're heading in the right direction. And we never argue over the same thing. It's always something different.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, because she's a woman.
Frank. Yeah, because she's a woman. It's great. It's great.
But I think the idea of this never happening is a false representation of it. You obviously you don't want to evoke it or provoke it or do any of that stuff. But when you keep moving up, I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. It's kind of like one of the reasons, like the characters like a James Bond or a Lara Croft, why do we like them? Because no matter what situation they're in, they're at that baseline. If they have a gun pointed in their head, they don't freak out. If they're sitting at a bar drinking a martini, they're actually in the same level. We watch that because we know we have that in us. That's why we admire it. And people don't realize, I'm like, don't you realize that is you? Because if it wasn't you, you wouldn't get the concept of that at all. Now, how you apply it, you know, it doesn't mean you go get a gun and put yourself in physical danger. You do it with something else. And we wouldn't recognize something that we already aren't. And that's where we come to understand, like, wow. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, we have the ability to control our emotions no matter what happens. Because the outside world is the obstacle course. I want to run it. But how I feel about it is up to me. Everything is perceived. That's my control. But once I perceive it, it's now determined how I'm going to experience it until I perceive it differently.
See, my whole like experience, just like all of this was the biggest thing for me. Was my entire life up in, you know, I mean, the first at least 28 years of my life, I would point the finger outside and say, this is the reason that I'm not happy. This is the reason I can't be successful. And it was never my fault, ever. You know, I just need, if just only this would happen, you know, the economy's in a recession right now. That's why it's hard to get work. I don't care what it was. Oh, you know, my parents never showed me that, you know, I should have, you know, if only my parents were only more like this, I would have already learned that. I've already known that. All of that was just this massive narrative of victim mentality, poor me, etc. holding me back. And when I started to take responsibility for everything, even those things like you kind of just touched on that, like, hey, that are outside of your control and there's outside factors, I even take responsibility for all of that. That is true, like, surrender to this experience and true acceptance, which are two very, continuing concepts of your discussion here. That surrender and that acceptance, that is when, for those listening at home, things really start to change, is taking full responsibility. This doesn't mean pushing yourself to a brink to where you hurt yourself and all this type of stuff. In society, we like go to these extremes. Well, what if this, and what about this? Stop going to these extremes and just realizing if you're pointing your finger outside of you and saying that this problem wouldn't exist if something's outside of you, that is incorrect. And really, really go within, because once you start taking responsibility is when you start to see true change in your life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would rather go and fix everything around them than look within and say, oh.
Yeah, that's
where 90% of the world's at. Hell, I'll go out and I'll do good deeds. I'm going to become a teacher. I'm going to teach children. I'm going to go feed the homeless. I'm going to do this. They're doing everything outside of them, but go within and do the work.
Yeah.
And this is what I see with like people who go to church and all this stuff. They're so on the outside doing everything in their power, but they're so afraid to go within. Yeah. They're so afraid.
They're literally putting the cart in front of the horse. Because like when you go within, you're going to feed the homeless, you're going to go to church or whatever it is.
100%,
it doesn't mean you don't do that. It's that when you put the cart in front of the horse has the ability to push the cart. So you do see movement. But what a cumbersome way to travel.
Yeah, right.
Because now I have to be in charge of the horse pushing the cart. But if I put the horse in front of the cart, actually I could sit on the cart and be pulled, and then I just direct the horse, and then the travel begins. Mm-hmm. So all we do, like you said, chop the wood and gather the water doesn't stop, because we have to do that to live. But the way I feel about it, I'm like, now I get excited about chopping the wood and gathering the water. Mm-hmm. I get excited about going to the gym and like, I'm going to die today. I'm going to die, but I got to do it.
The point of the saying is, just because when you become aware and awake to these, it's not like, oh, your world all of a sudden changes. Right. You still have to go out, chop the wood, carry the water. There's an old saying.
The way you feel about the world literally changes.
Oh, absolutely.
Instantly, because you generate that feeling. But yet the physical world still looks the same, but the way I'm looking at it is different.
Mm-hmm. That's and how you're experiencing it is different.
Yeah.
Now you're flowing with it rather than fighting it. Yeah. I remember like when I started learning these concepts, I was so trying to like make matter on matter work. And I was just like, okay, I got to get out and do this for a number of hours in order for to see this type of results. And it's going to take me 10 years to get to where I want to be monetarily. All these like weird conditions that I was setting on myself. And none of those were true. In fact, I could easily turn around and say I could have all this within 1 year. Within 2 years, whatever your goals are.
A different approach.
Yeah.
And we make meaning of our life. Like, we are the meaning makers, and we make meaning of different things that we experience or commit to. So, like, for example, if you are finding yourself in a spiritual transformation and it happens like that, but now you have to make meaning of that experience. And I also want to just share, because it's on my heart to share this, there's going to be times in your life where you establish like everything's in a groove and you're flowing and the world has so much color and it's amazing, and then something really tragic can happen. And that happened to me. And when my mom died, I literally, there was no more color. Like it was almost like a physical manifestation.
You stepped into the dark.
Yeah, I could not see color. Everything was black and white. I still remember driving down this windy road of where she lived at the time, and I was like, dang, literally everything is gray. Why can't I see any color anymore? And I wanted to bring this up because I think sometimes we get caught up in I have to always be feeling my best, doing my best on top of things, and I have to be in this flow state constantly. But you can be in that state even through really tragic times, and you can experience those dark things, and it doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you less worthy of happiness, or it doesn't mean that you're doomed to darkness when you're experiencing it. And I've since come out and seen more color, but I sat in that darkness and I allowed myself to feel, and honestly, it was like I could honor that experience that was so hard by sitting in the darkness. rather than running from it. So if you're in something that's really hard and you're feeling this urge to run from it, allow yourself to experience it and sit in it, because it's a sign of respect and a sign of surrender, but also like you're honoring that that's part of the experience too, and it's okay to feel that.
Yeah, it's true, because now, unfortunately, now we have medications that could somewhat put that off, and people will go that route. But life does this to us on purpose. It's like, that's why there's a winter. In a winter, every growth thing, it becomes tenacious to survive the next cycle. So everyone's going to have a winter. I don't care who you are. But when you understand what the winter is, it doesn't mean that, oh, if someone dies, I shouldn't feel that sad. I'm like, no. Don't try to get out of it. Submerge yourself right into it. And that, because I had an experience, like, when I was 20 years old, my 18-year-old brother was killed in a car accident. And I remember that's the growth part of my life. That's what created the deep roots. And everything I known from that moment on in life was, because we were young, this shouldn't happen. And I remember, like, wow, everything that was told to me, I had to take and set aside. And then I started doing things that weren't good for me either, which I'm like, okay, this isn't working. But when I finally sat with it and allowed myself to cry, allowed myself to mourn, I learned something. But I was trying to avoid it by doing a lot of outwardly things, trying to put it off, avoiding it, doing that. And you can't avoid it. You can't. It's not to be avoided. But again, it's painful, but there is some tremendous growth and pain, right? Like, you work out, it's painful to the muscles. The lactic acid buildup, it's not comfortable. But when you understand what it's doing, you don't put it off. You just do it, and you get through it. Another rep.
Well, if you're going to show up in something, show up fully for the entire, every part of the experience. Like, that's how you're going to actually have the full experience. But if you resist it or you avoid, then you don't actually get any of the benefits. So then you think, wow, I've wasted time. I don't believe in wasting time. But, like, to some extent, you're like, if I'm going to be here for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or I'm going to have to deal with this loss for the rest of my life, I need to sit with it and experience it to its fullest spectrum and its fullest, like, the purpose that it's being put in my life for, so I can actually get the benefit or get the experience out of it.
Yeah. So if your mom passed a year ago, roughly, so I mean, you've been, in this awake and aware situation prior to her passing, then, correct? You've kind of, very much in this empowered role, helping others, coaching, correct?
Yes.
So how was that? Because that is like, I mean,
how is it?
So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because that right there is, I mean, that's something that, nobody could expect. It's very personal to you and yourself. Was it something that you were glad you were at least, like, in this headspace, to kind of, I guess, mentally wrap your head around it, and the experience?
Good point.
Probably at that point, you don't think, like, I'm glad I'm in this headspace. It's just the whole world is flipped upside down.
I've just never had any experience like that.
Yeah, it's
like, both my parents are still here, my brother and my sister, and I'm very blessed in that sense. But, like, I just, that is a true life turned upside down moment.
And I like that you asked the question despite having not experienced it, because I think sometimes people avoid these topics and conversations.
It could be uncomfortable.
Right. So it's great that you're asking the question. And I think when it happened, it was so traumatic, but I could understand trauma. So that changed things. I could understand grief. So I think the education and the knowledge was beneficial to some degree. But there was still the experience of loss that was so intense where, I think I was existing only in grief, because I would go to bed crying and I'd wake up and I'd already be crying, and then I'd go in the shower and I'd be crying, and then it was a traumatic experience, so I couldn't go 5 minutes without hearing from my family without thinking that they died, and then I'm going to start crying.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Absolutely.
But, and like, I'm really glad I let myself feel, because, and it was the awareness of knowing that feeling would be healing for me that I gave myself that. So I'm glad that I was in that headspace for sure, where I could see it and I could actually support my dad and sister a lot through it, because I had that perspective. So it was a real blessing, but it came with some judgment too. And it was weird because we were having different experiences as well. And so on one hand, I have this knowledge of psychology and counseling and like how I could approach what we're experiencing. So it felt very analytical. And then there was this other side of me that's like just feeling it and going through it and processing it. And it's like, how do I show up as a sister, as a daughter, not just as the person who's trying to understand the nature of this death and the experience that we're having because of it. And I thought I would never like be happy again. And I think it's because I talk to her every day. I talk to her on the way to the gym every day. And that day I didn't go to the gym. I was like, oh, I need a rest today. And I would always call her on the way. And so that ate me up a little bit. And there were just aspects to this that I had to really sit through. And that was just a hard year in general. Cause like I had been competing and there was like this craziness of the world, and then our house caught fire, and that put my dad back from being able to move with her, and then we lose her, and then I'm moving and I'm starting this internship, and then she can't see me go on this new life, and then it was just
all at once.
Very disruptive cycle. Yeah,
all at once. And my grandpa died like not even that long after, which is so you're going.
Was that your mom's dad?
My dad's.
Oh,
so
okay.
and he was my last surviving grandparent, and it was like, on.
Yeah.
You know, you're going through these challenging things, and at the same time I was up leveling in my own life in so many ways, so it was this weird
paradox.
Well, when you shared that, like most people, these serious traumas like you're describing, that's what gets them to wake up. And no longer feed this, old mental like.
Well, it can wake them up.
Well, it can. Yeah, of course it can.
We
Everything
always hear
can
about the people that wake up. We don't hear about the people that don't.
Well, you absolutely. I just mean like I think it's very unique your position. Already being very aware of this observer role that you have, and your ability to push through and all this. And
your baseline was. Like no matter what happens, now
you were leaps ahead of others.
Is to like step forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you have to crawl, just crawl forward.
I had that tenacity, that desire to push through, and like that. I think did give me a lot of strength and resilience. Yep. And now having been through that experience too, it actually like in my last prep, I was like, nothing's as hard as what I've already been through. Like nothing will ever be as difficult as this was. And so I don't have this. I'm so glad I went through that because
of course.
Of course. But I'm really glad that I've been able to come out of it with new lessons and experiences, and it's given me like compassion and perspective and a gratitude and closeness with my family, and it's different. But all those difficult experiences we have teach us something if we're willing to not avoid it.
But death of a parent like that, I'm assuming she's pretty young. Yeah,
she was young. She was, she was born in 1960. So, I mean,
that's the year my mom was born.
Yeah.
Yep.
What 60? What 1960?
60 flat.
Yeah. So that's very unexpected. Anything that comes after this, you got.
The hard part, too, is you don't just grieve what you had. You grieve what you thought you would have. Yeah. So I grieved, like...
Good point.
Yeah.
She wouldn't be there to see me get my degree. She wouldn't be there to see me have a baby. She wouldn't, and I couldn't have that experience with her by my side. And I felt like there was so much left to experience with her.
That's even harder, right? Like, because you could have the memory of hanging out with her, but... the memory of not.
Exactly.
I remember with my brother, that was hurt more than the memories in the past.
Yeah.
It was what he's not going to experience future-wise.
And all that you could see for them existing that no longer would.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, where have you seen your mom since then?
Oh, my gosh.
Because now you see what I mean? Like, I'm sure you see her everywhere. And, and that's you with her. But you're with her. You're with her,
she's here right now.
So
that's it.
I'll share two stories.
All right.
So, because I think it can kind of help. Well, one, I texted you a picture while I was in Sedona when we had set this up.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is my more recent experience. So, we get to this mountain, and there's this part that a lot of people don't push through or whatever. And me and my friend were like, let's go, right? So we start climbing up this mountain, and it's called Portal Rock, and like it's like a portal to other dimensions, they say. And there's this one thing that I think just has a higher concentration of some mineral. I want to say magnesium, but I could be off. That makes it really black.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the rock looks like an eye. So they say, you know, put your
Third
pineal,
eye.
your third eye, onto this rock. Well, there's this guy up there who's like going up, and to me, I'm like, you seem like one of those fluffy spiritual,
Yeah. Woo woo.
Yeah,
New age guys.
And I'm okay with some woo woo, but when my interpretation of his energy was, you want everyone's experience to be yours, and you guys are probably understanding. I'm very against that. I want everyone's experience to be theirs.
That's a lot of New Age people.
Yep.
That's a good way to
Unfortunately,
say it, honestly.
Yeah.
I've never heard it said like that.
Yeah, it's a brilliant way of saying
Yeah,
it.
that's a good way to say that.
Thank
Because
you.
that is what New Age shit is. Like, this is how the experience is supposed to be. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Don't tell me my experience,
Yeah,
dude.
so put a white robe on and
Yeah.
walk with me. I'm like,
Exactly.
Exactly. So, this guy's up there saying this, and I was like, well, it's worth a shot. I'm a very
Yeah.
open person,
Yeah.
so I'm going to do it. And he's like talking, and I'm thinking, this guy better be quiet because I'm trying to get in this state, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm so nice, huh?
I'm so nice.
So I'm like trying to connect, you know. I'm like, okay, show me what I need to be show me what I need to see and or feel or experience. And suddenly I smelled my mom.
Oh, that's
Wow.
awesome.
It was amazing. And when she died, I smelled her everywhere. For me, it was olfactory. It was like, there was this very particular smell. I just like smelled her everywhere. She was on my clothing. She was like everywhere.
Because
And
she was with you everywhere.
genuinely, I believe that.
100%.
Yeah.
And I got that overwhelming feeling, and then I just started crying, and it was healing. And then I started reflecting, because I've been having these breakthroughs lately around my spirituality, because when she passed, I was so mad at God. I was like, you didn't save her. Like, if my mom went through this, no one can get through this. So I had this like really negative perspective, and I was like, if he didn't save her, and she loved God, she worshiped him, she raised me in a house of
belief. Yeah.
Yes. And I always had resistance. And then I realized, like, how many times did he save her other than this time? How many times was he there and giving her strength that I just never saw? Because when I walked into that house after she died, I remember collapsing on the floor and just feeling like, what's the point of all of this if at the end of the day I don't even have her? And that perspective changed a lot as I continued to process this, and I actually realized, wow, there were notes from us in her purse, and I thought, wow, how many times did reading those notes help my mom? And then it hit me, well, maybe the same thing is true with all these words of God. And then I'm like coming down this mountain in Sedona, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been wanting my relationship with God to be what other people have their relationship with God as. It was that it should look like this. And I realized he's been there in so many times, and I'm not someone who has strong faith right now. I'm not someone who is like going to church or worshiping Jesus in a way that other people do. It's not this outward thing, but I had this shift in me where I realized, like, he has been present. And other times when I was trying to believe in like crystals and chakras and the universe, like, that felt good too, but it was always with this understanding there was something higher. And I realized that my relationship with God, he's actually always been there, but because I was focusing on the relationship I didn't have that I thought I should, I felt that he wasn't. So I saw him in that. I saw him in the time when I was really struggling. I saw him in a time when I got in a bad car accident in 4th grade with my sister, and I could never imagine what you actually experienced, but that feeling of loss was present, and I was scared, and there were many times where he was there, but because I just like, oh, he's not in my life, and I don't like this connection, I had this resistance and this prayer circle one time. So like, my mom has presented herself in many ways. Even I turn on Spotify and like a song from a band that she would listen to comes on, and I'm like, I'm skipping. And then my past prep, I was like,
Beatles?
No, it wasn't. It was for King and Country, and and there was a specific song that would come on, and it was called Priceless. She had got me this shirt that said Priceless, and I was like, I'm not listening, because I'm like, I don't want to get in my mom's headspace. Like, I don't want to know I don't want to know. And then one time in my prep, there was this song from them that said "Cheering You On," and I was like, "You're kidding me." I'll let this one play because I feel like mom's trying to tell me something, and it was so beautiful, and it just continuously opened me up. So she's been everywhere and in everything, and I've realized as well that there were a lot of things I didn't love about what my mom did. She was a workaholic for sure. She always was late everywhere because she was, now I realize it's because she was giving so much of her energy to everyone, and she was such an amazing woman in that way, and she had this drive, she had this vision, she had this purpose, and she was this amazing energy, like so extroverted, like everybody knew her, all this. And I used to like hate that she would be gone a lot working, not home a lot. We had deep conversations around that as we got older that helped me to heal. But then my friend put it in perspective one time. She's like, Celeste, sometimes you have these fears of becoming like your mom in these ways, but have you ever stopped to think about all the amazing ways you're like your mom and how those things wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for that thing? So I was like, oh my gosh. Like, yes.
Just that little flip of perspective.
Yes. So now I
bit.
can see her in me in like really positive ways, and I embrace that, and I love that. And even right after she died, I was on the airplane, and I was like, I'm going to color this hummingbird in on this like coloring book. And she loved hummingbirds. Well, then I get this text from someone who knew her and says, look, there was a hummingbird on my hand. This is after we landed. So it was
this
at the
is so
exact
cool.
same time.
Synchronicity, yeah.
Yeah, it was at the exact
hummingbirds
same
don't
time.
like to land on people.
Yeah, exactly. And it just sat there, and she's like, it was almost like it didn't want to leave. And I was like, I sent her a picture back. I was like, no way this just happened, as I was on an airplane coloring this in. And so
those are the miracles that we all exist every day in multiple hundreds and thousands of people's lives. We just don't ever get to hear about.
Well,
those are happening all the time.
This is what entanglement's all about: is understanding we're all one, coming from the one universal mind, but having different experiences. And the thing is, like, we don't know. Like, there's a social construct of what a parent's supposed to do and be, and I'm like, sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. What I mean is a social construct. We don't really know what a perfect parent is.
No.
You know, we really don't.
That's something we created, and we say, a perfect parent should be this.
Yeah, I heard like someone talk about Gandhi. He said he was the worst parent in the world. I'm like, based on what?
Yeah.
I'm like, because he was never there for his kids. I'm like, he was there. I'm like, but I know parents that are there all the time, and you know, it's just weird. I'm like, I don't know enough to know that that's the way it's supposed to be. I really don't. I've been around on this planet 55 years now, and I've been contemplating for a very long time. And I thought I knew everything, and I realized I don't know anything. And the more people I talk to, the more people I interview, and all of a sudden I realize, why is a social construct saying this is how it's supposed to be? I'm like, we don't know. We don't know. I'm not saying because I say I don't know, that doesn't mean they're off the hook. But then I'm like, okay, what am I doing? You know, how can I be more in tune to what's going on in my world? And that's how I look at it. I don't know what the best parent is. I really don't. And when people do that, they set these standards that are beyond. And I think that's right now, talking about the algorithm of everything put in these categories. That's what we're doing right now.
Yes.
If you have this, you're this. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm like, is that actually bad?
Right.
Like, I remember Tony Robbins. I was reading his book Life Force. When he was 30 years old, they found a tumor on the back of in his brain, his pituitary gland, which he has a Giant's disease. So 30 years old, they want to remove it. Well, the way he says it, he's been to multiple doctors. By this time, he was already Tony Robbins. He was very popular. And he's like, I finally found a doctor to tell me what I wanted to hear. And because of that, he was excreting a lot of growth hormone. So because of his work ethic, the way he is, he needed that. Here he is. He's in his 60s. He never got it removed. So it was, the doctor said, he goes, Tony, now many bodybuilders would love to have that input of testosterone, growth hormone. He goes, just use it. And he did. Different way of looking at something that the doctor wanted to get rid of. I'm like, we don't know. I'm not saying that if you go in, you should have
tumor,
I'm not saying no. I'm not a doctor by any means.
That's where people go.
Tony Robbins perceived it and said, you know what? This is not a weakness. This is a strength. And
that's a really cool story. I had no idea about that.
And you can't look at the guy's life and say he's lying. He's 60, I don't know, close to 65 now, and he's still relevant. You know, we don't know. We don't know. But when he turned that around, I'm like, holy shit. So a kid with ADHD, I'm like, use that to your advantage.
Exactly.
Not try to get rid of it.
That's right.
Again, when your mom died, you didn't try to get rid of the pain. how do I use it to my advantage? How do I, in the moment you don't think of that, but how do I then take this and transmute it into the greatest power we know? And you're going to spend the rest of your life doing that.
Yeah.
You know your mom wants that too. In your core, you
Yeah.
know your mom doesn't want you to be in pain or suffering or sorrow or any of that. If she was sitting here across from you, she would say, "What you're doing, keep going."
Yeah, that is
keep going.
The pain and suffering is part and parcel of the process. She just doesn't want you to use it as an excuse.
Exactly.
And I could tell by the way I'm talking to you, you're not.
Yeah, you're not
You're
an excuse
You're
type of
actually
person.
taking that and strengthening yourself. You took that really cold winter and you created hardy plants in your garden, and that's what it's about. It's just knowing. There is this knowing, but everything else that we argue over are half truths. Like the empirical truth is all truths are true, but there is this underlining knowing that everything works out. And I don't mean the way it's supposed to be, because we interject my perception. So people are like, oh, I'm like, no, perceive it differently. Yeah, it's still cloudy out, but if I perceive it differently, I get a different, at least I have choice or strength over it. It doesn't mean because it's cloudy, I'm going to be dancing around thinking it's sunny out and put sunblock on. I'm like, that's just ridiculous. I'm like, don't do that. That's nutty.
That's
like, oh, it's sunny out. I'm like, it's raining. You moron.
Dance in the rain. Enjoy the rain. But don't tell me it's sunny.
Yeah. We didn't come here to be delusional.
Correct.
At all. And I think, so that's what happens is like a lot of these works are getting out about people talking about strength and power and stuff like that. And a lot of people take it and only read half the book, so to speak, and says, you're perfect the way you are.
Yep.
You are perfect the way you are. But you want to be a different R tomorrow, a different R the next day. You want it. It's a natural propensity to expand as a human being. That's what we do.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you are perfect where you are, but what are you going to do with that?
Yes.
You want to expand it. So when people, they read half the book and just stay where you are. Well, what happens is physics. If you're perfect the way you are, if you stay there, there is no such thing as stagnation. Everything is moving. Everything's vibrating. I can choose what direction to go in. Is it preferential, not preferential? If you don't choose, you may go preferential. You may not. And if I don't, I end up going and falling backwards. And that advice someone says you're perfect the way you are, you diminished something.
Well, one will be chosen for you regardless.
Yes. So choose it. Even if it's painful, choose it. I don't care. Just choose it. Yeah.
Well, Celeste, you were telling us about a boyfriend, 7 years. I'm just going to start pouring all the salt on all the wounds.
Let's go.
but you had mentioned that, right before the start of this show. Tell us a little bit
hole to climb out of today.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us. I'm trying to touch on things that I know all of us are going through at home with. So, I mean, you're juggling family stuff. You're juggling your growth. You're a business owner, all this. And when did this 7-year-long relationship end?
August.
Of this year?
Oh, yeah.
So this is recent.
Yeah. Yeah,
so this is a lot of shit coming at you from different angles.
So basically, like, if you zoomed out
your
of
personal
my life,
you know,
you'd be like, what the hell?
That's what I mean.
And I was completing my master's while running my business, and I was competing in bodybuilding, going through, like, intense preps and, like, processing so much thing. Like, it was a lot all at once, but I love that, and it's like a new threshold. But yeah, so the relationship ended, and it was really like the theme of it was I knew that I was worthy of more and I wasn't getting it, and for so long I just justified treatment that I didn't deserve.
Okay.
And granted, like, there were really good parts of the relationship. There were also really things that I wasn't the woman I wanted to be in a relationship anymore, or maybe ever, because I didn't know how to express it.
Now, you've been in a relationship for 7 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but I think that's what a lot of people told me relationships. At some point, it was working beautifully.
Yes.
Right? And that's what people, they want to scrap and throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it sounds like you're growing tremendously. And I'm sure this gentleman's growing too.
Yeah.
If that your relationship with a gentleman, I don't want to presume anymore.
Yes. Team Ween.
Yeah.
I've never heard that, but that was funny as fuck.
Yeah. But
nice.
And I'm sure he's growing too, but in different directions. And that's really when you look at, and I always like to apply physics into it, especially in the quantum field, that there is an explanation for this. It's not that you were just growing this way, he was growing this way, to assume. And that, when I start looking at it that way, it's like, yeah, it was almost time for it to end.
Yeah, it was time. It was time. Actually, I think I processed it for a long time too, and there were things that changed in the relationship that no longer allowed me to feel some of the values within a relationship I had. I didn't have trust. I didn't have respect. I didn't have the clarity I wanted and deserved. And so I realized, like, I could only give so much. And without going into extreme detail about how that relationship unfolded, it was like, why, when it was going to end, were you ready to become this person that I thought you could be? But at the same time, I've learned so much after that breakup, like so much. I'm really proud of myself, actually.
But this helps people at home here,
Yeah,
like, oh my God, there is light
is.
at the end of this.
There is.
You know, when they're feeling like shit and they got out of a hard relationship.
Yes, empower yourself to make a decision, because once you make that decision, you're gonna be able to move forward and know, like, was it the right? If it's meant for you, it'll be for you. But also, like, I was liberated. Once I made that choice for myself, I was like, I can have what I want. I do deserve what I want. It is okay for me to ask for this. This was not a reflection of the relationship I want. Therefore, it's okay for me to want something different. And when you're in a relationship for that long too, it almost feels like it felt like a partnership. A lot of the decisions I made was like with the future in mind as well. And so letting go and walking away meant I was also letting go of the future I thought we'd have. But I remember asking myself if my daughter, because I want to have kids. I've always wanted to have kids, except for when my mom died. That changed for a bit. But when I decided, like, to look at the relationship, and I was like, I'm no longer going to look at the pros and cons of this relationship. I'm no longer going to look at what's gone wrong, what's gone right, and try to figure it out. Instead, I'm going to look at, who have I become? Who do I want to be? What kind of woman do I want to be in the relationship or girlfriend? And what signs are showing me that this is not the person I will be doing it with? And one thing that was glaringly obvious was, like, okay, if my daughter, a future daughter, saw me in this relationship, what would her interpretation be? How would that maybe inform her view on relationships and life, and how a woman can communicate or be treated? And then also, how does a woman feel in that relationship? And then I took a step back further, and I was like, in what ways have I changed? In what ways do I need to show up better in a future relationship, especially once that relationship ended? It's like, what kind of woman do I want to be for the man that I want? Because the man that I want has XYZ qualities and values and beliefs. And then, you know, if I want to attract that, or if I want to have that in my life, I have to accept that I'm worthy of it. And that comes from a knowing and a lot of processing and letting go of what I learned from that relationship. And then it opened up my eyes to a lot of my own patterns and tendencies. Like, I realized I was really anxious. Like, I realized I was trying to confirm anxiety around men by seeking out men who would make me feel anxious. Not saying he necessarily did. He was amazing in many ways. Again, I don't want to say it was terrible. It wasn't abusive or anything like that. But there were things that just weren't working. And anyway, now I feel like I've opened myself up to receiving the love that I know I'm worthy of, and I'm establishing connection with men, people, person, whatever. Again, I don't know how. I'm not trying to say this without being like.
Don't worry about it. Yeah,
I'm like,
100%.
People get it. I think a lot of that stuff is just the people that talk about that type of stuff just want to argue.
Right.
Most people don't.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is like I've established a connection with a man who I think has a lot of qualities that I want, and whether or not that goes anywhere, it matters, but it doesn't matter in the sense that I'm learning about what do I feel, like what am I now feeling that's different, and what do I like about the way that feels, and how is that going to inform my decision making or the process and the approach. And I'm recognizing that that's more important. So in letting go of a 7-year relationship and letting go of something that I thought would be, I actually opened myself up to what I'm worthy of. And I've realized, like, what I go for the person I was with now, like would I go for my ex now?
No.
Yeah.
And that's because we were on different growth planes, and now he's stepping up and he's growing in many of his own ways, but it's just still not right. And I knew that the relationship couldn't continue in a healthy way, knowing what I knew and feeling how I felt. And for that reason, I had to cut it off, because if I knew I couldn't say yes if he asked me to marry him, and that had been going on for a while, I didn't like how I had this lack of trust. I had to end it.
Yeah. What's impressive about you, and historically, you're only 26.
Yeah. I'm about to be.
You're literally
Almost, yeah.
literally doing the process in which, like, I've come to understand later on in life, is you're actually observing. Like, when you actually went in there and held yourself accountable to your unborn daughter, like, that
was awesome.
That is an illuminating process of standing on and looking at the whole picture. It's kind of what the director does of a movie. Most people are stuck as the actor in the movie, like, what's going on here? I'm like, well, if you listen to the director, you'll probably have a chance to win the Academy Award. Like, the directors, what the hell are they doing? I'm like, yeah, they do. They have a vantage point that you don't. They have a vantage point of actually knowing what the movie's about. You only have a vantage point of knowing what your characters. So I see you as your own, and actually listen to your own director rather than getting advice from other people. You're stepping out and said, how would my unborn daughter look at me if I was in this relationship? That's huge. That's something that obviously you're like an old soul. But that's something, obviously, that's what you're teaching people, right? Is how do I step out of it? That's the most important part, not how to act. Well, but how would you, if your unborn child, like, was looking at you right now, how would you want to be portrayed? And that's amazing. That's why you're impressive, yeah.
You can also tell a lot about somebody's level of maturity about how they speak about their exes, you know? And when somebody goes into this tirade of, oh, this piece of shit and this, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, there's a lot of, like, unresolved personal stuff that you need to take from that, you know? There's never a time in our life where we need to cut somebody down or they're so horrible or rag on them and all this. So I just love hearing how you talk about this ex-partner, you know, because that's important. Like, there's no reason to ever put somebody down or hurt someone. Everybody's on their own path. And so
and not only that,
I love hearing that type of conversation that you're having.
And it was a relationship.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people will judge who they were and who they are.
Totally.
But it's like when you're building a relationship, whether you're dating or you're married or you're establishing a connection or maybe you're already in one and that's continuing to grow, that's two people involved. So it's not just about you. It's not just about them. And I can take responsibility for a lot of the ways that I wasn't perfect, a lot of the ways that I didn't show up how I wanted, or a lot of things that I could have done differently or could have communicated differently. I can also see a lot of times where I did exactly what I would want in a relationship and it wasn't. And that's where I knew, okay, now this relationship's not exactly going how I would like. But there was a reason it was lasted for 7 years, right? He was really great in many ways. And he showed me a lot of what I want. But it's okay for me to also recognize, like, the two of us coming together was no longer the vision or what I wanted or needed in my life. And I think it's actually true for him too. I think that if we had stayed together, there would have been a dependency potentially. So it's actually probably positive for both of us that it did end. But yeah, I mean, he was there for me through so much. I would never want to speak badly. And also, people change and grow.
Hell yeah, they do.
If he exists in my mind forever as this version of him, that's not fair, and I wouldn't want to exist in someone's mind only as the one version of me that they've met, you know? But
the thing is you're taking responsibility in your part. And I think when people
true
do that,
wisdom, you know, like, honestly.
Yeah, when you do that, it becomes very difficult to judge another. But when you don't take responsibility, it becomes easy.
Very easy. In fact,
people.
You'll tell every reason why it's their fault.
Yeah.
That's what people at home, like, when you see yourself pointing that finger out, you got to go, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. This is my ego taking over.
Yeah, when people start a relationship, I don't like this in people. I don't like that.
Yeah. Oh, God,
I ask them, why don't you like that? And there's a question I always ask myself and I ask others. And I do it not because I know the answer, because they'll come with the answer. But I don't like this. Well, why? And you keep asking the question why, you come to a point where you have no idea why. Like, you just made it up, or society made it up for you. And I'm like, but we do have preferences. Like, I'm not making, like, we come here with preferences. Little children, we know what they were. And now that's the dream which we're still leading and following. You know, you go back to your childhood. Like, we had, remember, you know Jeff, right?
Yeah.
We had him on. Remember we were talking about that? And, like, I don't know if you listened to his whole podcast.
I listened to the whole one about him being a shepherd, yes.
Yeah,
nice.
The shepherd. So at 9 years old, so we were talking about that. And, like, a lot of people say, if you can go back to your nine-year-old self, what would you tell the child? It's like, no, what would the child tell you?
Yes.
Not the other way around. We got that backwards. I'm like, that child knew everything. It just hadn't experienced everything. It's going to experience it. So I go back to my child, that childlike state, to amplify my life now. I don't go back and tell the child, oh, you're going to be okay. I'm like, the child knew they were okay. Here is a man living in a refugee camp, hurting goats.
Mm-hmm.
And at 9 years old, he was in the presence of God in the jungle.
Right.
I'm like, come on, he knew he was okay. Yeah, the circumstance wasn't preferable, you know, all this stuff. So we go back to that childlike state or remain in a childlike state. That's the most amazing thing. And then we take responsibility for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. And also, like, when you're on an airplane and the kid's screaming in the back and they're like crying, you're like, I feel you, actually. I'm just not expressing it because I'm an adult. That would be strange if I did it, but I'm okay with it.
That's a true statement. Yeah. It is scary as shit to fly.
I still do that. I just do it when Karen's around, though. She has to put up with it. She goes, if the world knew how you were, I'm like, but they're not going to find out.
That stays between us, Karen.
Yeah, I made her sign a non-confidential agreement, so she can't say anything. That's it. It's like, you can't blow my cover.
Or NDA.
Yeah. Yeah, non-disclosure, right? So it's like, yeah, you can't say this stuff.
We're all kind of walking around with a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
Oh, the world can't know this about me. Oh, it can't know this.
Yeah, well, now the world knows about it because we're on air.
Oh, I know.
You're found out now.
Actually, that's the greatest thing is when you put it out there and everyone's like, yeah, I do. Like you
exactly.
said, the 3-year-old.
Everybody knows.
Like, yeah, everyone, I do that too.
Yeah. Everybody thinks everybody's having, that's just unique to them, or that, nobody's going through what I'm experiencing. And that it was me getting over that head talk that really allowed me to grow, because I thought like I was only one going through certain types of problems or experiences or feeling weird or anxious or not enough, just simply not enough, or like how am I ever going to find success? All of these types of things that we like all silently go through. Yeah. You're not alone. You're not.
Yeah. When did you because I think everyone has this in their life, in multitudes of life, but usually the first time it happens, like, when did you first experience somebody you looked up to that looked perfect and you found that they weren't? Like they were
Good question.
Yeah, because they all of a sudden, and it's eye opening. It really is when that happens, because for one, it takes you releases you from that hook. It's like, thank God,
Oh man, well that's a big question. I don't know if I could cite the very first time, but probably at home. I mean, seeing, when your dad stubs their toe and they say, fuck. And then you're like, oh my God, my dad's a bad person.
See, because you lived in California. In New York, that was just...
that was normal. That was Saturday.
Yeah, that was any given day.
That was baseline.
And there was no stubbing of the toe. It's like...
It just started. Get the fuck out of bed.
Actually, my dad never cursed. He was a very quiet, very stoic man.
Yeah.
The only time I heard him curse was when he drove.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he's like, and he'd do it under his breath. And I remember one time cursing it from him. He said the F word. He goes, wait out, like, watch your mouth. And he's like, where'd you learn that from? Your freaking friends out there? And he would never curse. I'm like, Dad, I learned that from you. The hell you did.
That's
and it
so
was
funny.
when he was driving, like, and nobody. He grew up in Manhattan, so he didn't drive a car till he was like 21, 22 years old.
I was just gonna say people don't drive out
there.
I thought.
No, he didn't. So he came late to the game of driving. I think it's his frustration.
Yeah.
But I can't use the F word around him at all.
That's so funny.
I don't curse around my dad.
Yeah, no, I don't. My dad. I remember one time I was going through something. I'm on the phone with him. And I'm like, this and he goes, hey, watch your mouth. I'm like, Dad, I'm 35. Like,
Dad, I'm a full-grown man.
Yeah. But yet there's something, and it's true, there's something to it, because it's the control we want to have. Like, so now when I use a word like that, I use it purposefully to get some humor. I don't use it to denigrate people. I've never done that, actually. I would always do it for humor. But there is something in us that can control what we say, you know? You don't want to be out of control like I was when I was a kid, It's like
Yes, I don't know that I could cite an exact moment, but I think there were many moments where I realized, like, the people we look up to and the people who we admire and the people who are there for us, or maybe they're strangers to us, they're actually not all that they are. And I think, too, once you get to know yourself and you realize, like, it's actually an unfair expectation for me to be a certain way or for me to be perfect, you realize other people have that as well. And a lot of the times the reason why it's not shared in the moment. So, like, when I was really struggling with, like, doubt, or I was struggling with fear, anxiety, depression, it's like, who am I? It's hard to talk and articulate that when you haven't processed it. So a lot of the times we see people post-processing. So we think we're the only ones in the shit, essentially. And then we realize, no, there was a lot of people who have been through this, but not often are people sharing it while they're in it, because I know it would have been hard for me to conceptualize a lot of these experiences I had during the experience itself. It wasn't until I got through it where I could see more of the perspective. So I think that just reminding ourselves too, like what we see other people promote or share, or like you're maybe reading a book or you're getting an idea or you're listening to this podcast even, and you're like, well, I'm in this position, or what about this and what about that? It's like, you're still processing, you're still going through it. It's okay if you don't have all the answers right now. And it's actually like, you know that there's other people experiencing the exact same thing to some degree, and we're sharing these experiences. We understand it's an experience because other people have had them too. But when you feel alone, or when you feel like you're not enough, you can ask yourself, like, how do I know this is true or not true? Like establishing that evidence. But to kind of summarize that, I think, know that a lot of people won't share it while they're in it because they haven't processed it yet, and that's okay if you also are in it and haven't processed it yet.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's like you have to shoot the film before you watch it.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to narrate while it's going on, type of thing.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's got to go through the process. So.
And that's why it's like when people are struggling in your life too, like, let's not shake them and be like, you got to figure this out.
No, that never works.
No, because I wouldn't want someone to do that for me. You want to others. It's the golden rule. I don't care what religion you are.
My parents, people used to always try to do that to me growing up, and it made me fight more to like. No, I'm justified in feeling this way. Yeah, you have to be ready.
Yeah, I used to do that when I was heavy into reading different psychology and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I would read a book and I'd see this. Okay, this makes sense. And I'd look at someone like, you need to do this. But what I failed to realize, that was for me, not for them. And I realized that. But I think we like to test things out on other people before we do it on ourselves. But it never works. You have to test it on yourself. You're the only dummy around.
Well, as we start to learn about these concepts and go through them, you begin to see it in everywhere, in all your family, in all your friends, in all your working relationships, in all relationships. You start to see, and that back to like what Frank was talking about earlier, this whole reality or this experience that we call reality is, a lot of remembering just who we are, we're the creator, our involvement, this participatory experience. And we're experiencing ourselves through others, through other relationships, through these people, through all this. So there's no judging of that other, because there is no other.
No, it's like one big movie. If you're an actor on the movie, say the lead actor, everyone's the lead actor in their role, and like you're doing your part. And a lot of times an actor will get upset at another actor, and the director's like, "Cut, take 5, or come here. What's the problem? I don't like the way they're doing it." Like, well, you don't fully understand the movie in order for me not to have this character do that. But when the premiere comes, they're done acting. You watch it, and they're like, oh, because you can't see every moving part. So a great actor will no longer give their attention or judgment to the other actor. They'll give their attention to the director and then communicate with the other actor, because they don't know how it's supposed to turn out. And the director doesn't want them to know, because if you do, then you're overacting. You want to be in that moment, and we're all actors. Everything's a fractal. That's why we love movies, we love TV. It's what is it? We're acting. But like you said to yourself, your director said, "How would my unborn daughter, see me?" Yeah. Well, now you're the director saying, "Okay, let's pick up the shoulders a little bit. Let's approach the scene's still the same. I'm not changing the scene, but how would you approach the scene?" And cut, action. And you go back in. There goes Mike. But
I like that.
Yeah. So when you start to realize that we don't know enough, but we can be Academy Award winner and actors by being in the place we're on. We become responsible rather than reactive. And I can't. And I believe, like, even what you do, I mirror this for what I do. Like, I was joking around with people, like, you could tell the apocalypse is coming. It's like, why? I'm like, everyone's doing CrossFit. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're looking like the aliens that come land, and they're the only ones going to survive, right? Like, yeah, so they get ready. They don't know what to get ready for, but they get ready. But I believe when you do put yourself in this, you choose pain, you choose discomfort. At the level, when I say discomfort, it actually, I like the feeling. I love jumping in cold water and stuff like that, even though my body's like, what are you doing? But when something does happen that's out of your choice, you're oddly prepared. Then you you respond to it rather than react. So, like, imagine, like, because you've been preparing your whole life, when your mom died, you responded to it in the way you knew to respond. There might have been a bit of reaction, but we all do that. But you never ask for this. You don't know what's coming, but you realize, wow, this is what life is. It's about, humans are supposed to be responsible, the ability to respond. And we use these things to train for it. A firefighter uses, a decrepit building to start a fire to go in there. But when they go to the actual fire, it's not that same building. But they just respond, they go in, they do what they have to do. And that's when we set these things out. It's to respond. And not that we're looking for something tragic to happen.
Never.
It's not that. I'm not looking for that. But when things do happen, we know these processes. All of a sudden, when something does happen, when it does get dark, when the winter does come, okay, I got this.
I'll get through this.
Yeah, we'll get through this. And we know these cycles. I don't know the full length of this movie. I don't know what it's about. I'm still in it. I'm not rushing to get through it either.
Right.
But it's going to happen, but I'm not rushing to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is no right or wrong way necessarily.
No.
And what guides our life, I think anyways, is what we value. So when you focus on something, you're going to find more of it. And that's not just biological in that you have a reticular activating system that's been turned on and is going to see it, but it's also the fact that that's what's guiding you. So if you have a belief that you are not enough, you're going to find things to confirm that belief. If you have an understanding of the world being, let's say for me, my core values are freedom, impact, and love. So when I go about my day and I go about my world, I'm like, how is this satisfying freedom? How is it satisfying impact? How is it satisfying love? And so that's guiding my view as well. And I think we are prepared, especially when we've done a lot of the inner work. And if you haven't done the inner work and you go through something tragic, it actually puts you in a position to do more work. So you're never so vulnerable that you can't get through something. As long as you embrace that vulnerability as an opportunity, it allows you to see more. You don't have to know. I didn't have to know exactly what to do about this tragedy of my life or these very difficult things I endured over and over again. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I valued moving forward, and therefore I had to move forward. I knew I valued love, so I had to keep showing up with love for myself, love for others, love for my mom, love for my family, love for my mission, my purpose. It was the values that gave me a lot of faith and hope and belief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the incidentals never prepare you for anything, because
they can't.
They don't. What prepares you is the moment in which you're in. Yeah, you want to learn how to swim, you got to jump in the water. Mm-hmm. And then you learn how to swim, and then there's technique you can learn. But you have to start the process by the moment in which you're in. Yeah. But the prior process, if you want to look at it that way, let me know I got through it. Even if it was dismal, I got through it. Yeah. And so if you pay attention more alert, more focused, or however you want to look at it, and if you know you're going to get through this too, all of a sudden it becomes this more natural flow. Yeah, it's still painful. It still hurts. It's still, whatever. That doesn't change. But the worry of not existing goes away. Mm-hmm. Existence is who we are. Someone tried to get into a conversation about non-existence. I'm like, you can't have that conversation. Like, why? I'm like, because we exist. We're going to, this corporeal body of mine will disappear, but there's be essence to me that'll always be here. You know that from your mom. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's an essence there that will never leave the universe. But
we all come here with a signature frequency.
Yeah, we do. But the concept of non-existence is a very weird one, because we're here telling the story, but how can you say there's non-existence? I'm like, it's just weird.
Wait, help me understand what non-existence is.
Non-existence is the idea. So there are things that don't exist, but we don't know that because they're not in the realm of existence. So people think when they die, they won't exist. I'm like, you will exist.
Tangible.
No. But hey, listen.
Which, by the way, we've proven with the most recent Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Prize in Physics.
Well,
there is no local real. It's vibrating.
But even if you do look at the local real, look at the body. The biologists know that every 7 years you replicate a completely different body, based on the cellular structure, based on your thoughts, where you're doing that. So I'm 55. How many bodies have I changed into? So if I look at my yearbook picture, that body is no longer here. I have to admit that's dead. But there's something in me that was in that's here, that never will die. So,
and that's what we're all talking
about.
And
it didn't hit me till my son was young. I remember looking at him, as a young child, and then he grew. And that's when you start, as a parent, you start lining the kid up on the doorway. You take the pencil marker, the pen or
doing
whatever.
the height.
Yeah. And to the kid, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, you went in as an infant. You came out as a toddler. Like, they grew overnight. But to them, it's like, what's for breakfast?
Yeah.
It's not till we step away and look at a picture. I'm like, my God, I was once that little child. I'm like, that physical little child is no longer here. But what was in that child is still here. It's still looking through the eyes or the lens of your we think it's the eyes. It's actually your visual cortex. And then because it can gather information, can gather perspective, it can then look at the world differently. And so that's what I mean by non-existence. Non-existence doesn't really exist, because if it's not here, it didn't need to exist. So that would be in non-existence, but we can't think about it.
Good explanation.
Yeah, I got a headache saying that.
I think, though, that's an important way to kind of the mind is so malleable, and the more perspectives we can take a chance to look at from, it allows us to grow. So even from a perspective such as that, of non-locality, non-real, all that, we need to go there, you know?
Yeah, but that's, so like what you do is you use the physical attribute of life. And what now that's studying neurology, and you probably already know this, when they do that, the brain's going to unknown area. And if it's willingly go, it also creates new neural pathways. When it creates new neural pathways, all of a sudden the body jumps into this hyper mechanism, says, we need to actually rebuild the telomeres, which is the end of your chromosomes. We need to keep going. We need more of this hormone, that hormone. But if you're sitting on the couch and eating Cheetos, the body is so efficient. It's like, cut that system down. And I'm not saying not to sit on the couch. I'm not saying that. But when we do this, you actually expand not the physiology of the body along with the spiritual side of it too. So it's not, if you overstep it, you'll break down. But if you come right up to it, it will expand. You come right up to it, it will expand. And not everything has to be expanded in the physical body. Like I kind of did speak about Ronnie Coleman, because he was expanding in the physical world with his huge body. This guy's huge, right? Now he's expanding in the mental side of himself, because he has to overcome it. But it's not stopping him from working out. Like he's in a different realm of expansion, and not being him too. I don't want to speak for him, but he's still out there and he's still performing. He's obviously putting his life out there. He made a documentary, so he, like you said, he doesn't look at it as a failure. Some of us would, but we misinterpret what they were going for. But that might be the excuse of like, well, the guy, I think, does he still hold the record?
Technically for men's bodybuilding.
Oh.
But actually all of bodybuilding, as far as like amount of Olympias won.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the number one champion of all bodybuilding divisions with the most wins is a female in the bikini division named Ashley Kaltwasser.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Showing up.
There you go.
But I did want to mention too, like a lot of the times people will say that must not have been worth it. Why did they subject themselves to it? But those same people usually have something that someone else would say that's not worth it. Like, oh, that person has 7 kids. I would never. That's not worth it. Yeah. It's like, to who? To what? Like, why is that? It's not worth it to you, maybe because you have different values or beliefs or a way you want to live. So when someone looks at someone who competes and they're like, I could never do that. You're right. You probably could never do it because 1, you already are saying you couldn't do it. And 2, you wouldn't want it the way I want it. You couldn't commit to it the way I commit to it. And that's okay. You don't have to.
But if you could take that commitment and put it into an area of life that you actually want to commit.
Exactly.
So it's the mindset, not the doing. But the mindset and the doing are brilliant when they're put together.
But also, like, that's a very healthy avenue to come from. And, like, just take it, like, baseline and, like, our devices as our politics are today. Like, what gives you the right to think that, another person doesn't deserve their opinion about like a political party or whatever, etc. And so we have all these people saying, no, you're wrong, when they just need to say, whoa, I just see it differently. That may work differently for that person, etc. But instead we have these blinders on. We're told that everything is right or wrong. And I love where you were going with that, because that's the truth. Like, the more that people can get to that level of maturity of knowing, hey, look, just because it's not worth it to me doesn't mean it's not so worth it to that individual.
Yeah.
And that's an important point, because, like, That's true maturity. That's true growth. That's true, I don't know how to explain it other than like, that's how we need to be living, is allowing people their space to, my opinion should not affect or make somebody else like, I don't know. I don't have the right to tell somebody, oh, that's not worth it, or that doesn't matter, or something, or I'm right.
Well, you do have the right, but
of course,
it's not going to help you.
It won't change my circumstance, and for me to, that's all like little thinking mind. It's not greater mind.
Yeah.
Like we're so much greater than that.
The one thing I do remind myself because like when judgment comes up in my head, I don't express it out with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Is we're all going to die. So there's no getting this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There really isn't anything wrong. So what do I do from here to my moment of my death? Is it wrong? I'm like, no, it's an experience.
Yeah.
We know, moving in a direction of what we like to see, there is, like, if I want to go to California, live in Arizona, heading east is going to be, I can get to California, by the way, if I head east. It's going to take a long time because we live on a round planet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's going to take a while.
I'm not going to have fun in California the time I get there if I head east. But it can be done. But yet we're efficient beings. And all energy, the one quality energy has is it always moves in the path of least resistance. That's what we're always trying to do that. But again, my path of least resistance, hey, if I want to travel the world and end up in California, I'm going to head east.
Yeah.
Right.
But if that's my goal, that's nothing wrong with that. But people think like, oh, you're in Arizona, just head west. No, I'm going to head east. But they don't know my intention is to travel the world.
Mm-hmm.
So making a shot, some type of judgment.
Yeah, short-sighted. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to know everyone fully. You can't. Like I only know part. I barely know myself like myself yesterday was different than today.
Gosh, yes. Like I'm learning something new about myself every day, and that actually makes me love to learn more about other people every day, and like what's their intention, what are they thinking about, what are they experiencing. And you were talking earlier about how you learn a lot and then you grow a lot and you experience a lot, and I think with every day or every experience, like we learn something new, and that knowledge actually makes us realize how much we don't know. So it's like ignorance really is bliss.
It is.
Because the more you know, like the more that, so
well, that's why Socrates, Plato, that's why all those guys were talking about that.
Socrates,
I know that I do not know.
I jokingly say that Socrates came to a later part of his years where he just studied everything from the physical realm and realized, I know nothing. And I know I know nothing. Which is an enlightened moment, because once I realize I don't know anything, it leaves open for all the infinite possibilities that I can know. Yeah. And that's kind of like with this podcast. I'm like, think about all the guests we can have on, all the things we could talk about. There's no limits to it other than the limits we grant it. But if I know something, I have to argue it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, you're wrong. I know this thing. I'm like, no, I know an aspect of it. It's called a half-truth. Mm-hmm. And that half-truth is only true for me for now, right? I could say I'm 55, but in a year it's not going to be
a lot different.
Well, I can't say I'm 55 anymore.
Yeah.
That's why there's theories and there's facts and there's proof and there's things that still need to be explored. And when we are experiencing our life and we always think this is what I know, we would probably close ourselves off to maybe understanding or learning other new things or perspectives or taking a new way of looking at life. But I do think it's important for us to have something that we live by or aim for or
a foundation.
Yes, because otherwise we don't have we will exist in the constantly grasping for something to attach to categorize, to idolize. So I think it is important to have guiding principles in your life, values, guiding ideals that are really actually significant, could withstand the test of time for you, but being open to those things changing, being open to the fact that your life could present with something new that comes up. Or my dad used to always say, you have to be ready to pivot. That is what will make you successful, is if you can pivot. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand it, but as I got older, I realized it was there's so many times in life where you have no other option but to pivot. And when you do, and this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, you release the how and you just accept that you're going to get somewhere. Don't focus so much on how, just focus on being here right now and experiencing this so you can move towards that direction.
Yeah.
But you need direction.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's kind of like I heard this quote recently, and it's like it's not the direction the wind's blowing. It's how the sail picks up the wind, and the sail has to pivot towards it to move in direction. And guess what? A sailboat can move into the wind by tacking. So there's ways to get through the thing, and like there's empirical truths, right? I'm going to use one of them: the sun rises in the east, but I will perceive it differently every day of my life. So it's not like I take this truth, but still change the way I feel about it. I don't have to diminish it. Right. And so there is this thing, like you obviously, see how long, this bodybuilding, working out, or whatever you want to look at it, you'll probably do this for the rest of your life. Yeah. But as it goes on, how you perceive it will be different.
And it already has.
But I'm sure that changes every month.
But that becomes your fundamental truth, though.
Yeah.
And that's the brilliance of it. So people that don't have the fundamental truth, they're just blowing in the wind without any insight of direction. Like, what's your goal here? What do you want to see? Like, I don't care, wherever the wind blows me. And it's like, okay, it's that might be a truth to them, but.
I think also personality trait comes out where you're like, you like to know, you like to achieve, you were raised to achieve and pursue more and be stronger, go for certain things. And other people, I know it drives me crazy if I ask someone like what they're aiming for and they've got nothing. I'm like, how do you live? Like, how do you decide what you're going to do every day without knowing where you're headed?
You know what it is? They do know, from what I've understood, because I'm not like one of these like outward go-getters, but inside I do, but sometimes I can't explain it. So I always have a direction, but I'm not like this outwardly, like I got to pursue this thing. I'm like, no, I'm almost like the turtle or the tortoise in the show, but the tortoise is still moving towards the finish line. It's not like walking in a circle, you know what I'm saying? It's very slow and and that's kind of how I live my life. And I see people running back and forth. That's fine. But I do know, but people are like, what's your goal or whatever? And like lately, before I'm like, well, it's to feel good. But now it's like, okay, what answer do you want me to give you? Or what, it's like whatever it is I'm doing, I'm putting my whole heart in as much as I have in every moment.
And goals like that, they change based on where you're at in life, because like Frank, you're saying this as a goal of somebody who's been a business owner for 20 plus years, you're in a certain spot of your life where you have that gift, that ability to be able to take things slow like that. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to make money. They're trying to run, they don't know. And what I mean? That's not a good place to just be like, whatever.
Well, no. Yeah. Well, it's difficult to tell because like you said, it's personality. So there's things that, I believe younger kids are coming in knowing like whatever I know, they can know.
100%.
But what it took me to get to this point of knowing were what we call cycles of life. But when younger people come in, they already know what we need to know, especially because Google's here if you want information. So people are coming in a lot with their eyes open more.
You're right.
They are. So I don't say I'm any wiser because I lived longer. I had more experience.
Oh, no, I don't mean it like that. I mean that ability to take the foot. You see what I mean? Like it's not like the setting of a goal.
That's my personality.
Okay.
I was like that when I was boxing. I would always wait out the fight, and that's how I won the fights. Yeah, I wasn't rushing in to try to kill the guy. The guy tired out, bam. That was just my personality. I just waited for the right moment, where people are trying to get in there and kill you. But that was my personality. If I tried it the other way, I failed. I didn't like it. It didn't work. It didn't work for me.
See, and that's what I love about this is there's no right way. There is no wrong way.
No, it's not. I wouldn't suggest. For one, you don't have to suggest someone how to have a personality. They do. But there are obviously there are things. There are litmus understanding of tests like to look. Is this working? That's the question I ask Mike. Is this working? Because if I had that, if I had that type of attitude and I was losing every fight, I would have to reevaluate it. But I wasn't.
And the easiest way to tell if something's working is how do you feel? How does this feel? At least that's been a good guiding principle for me my entire life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to lose every fight and say, I feel great.
You'll know what it feels like. Your body doesn't lie to you. You'll know if it feels good or doesn't feel good.
Because it is part and parcel. Like you can't, people try to separate. They got into New Age. They try to separate the spiritual side from the physical side. I'm like, well, what's the point then?
It's all one.
You might want to put the spiritual first, the horse in front of the car in order to have a better travel. But So
Smoother travel.
Get into the state and then take care of the physical. But they're equal in value. They really are. Like, what good is a horse without the cart, so to speak? It's just you have to know where to put the two in order to have that brilliant ride. So people are trying to separate them. I'm like, so you got somebody that's so head and heels over the physical world, and someone's off in a cave meditating. I'm like, I want to be somewhere. Again, you see the attitude, or you could see the sustainability within that.
Yeah.
All right, because the people that are in the cave, Buddha went off into the wilderness because he lived in a palace, and they realized this isn't working either. So he came to this point, what he called the neutrality state or the balance state, and everyone.
Celeste was talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
which I thought was cool. You were talking about that. It's not you don't have to be so high and then come back down low.
No.
It's a place of neutrality.
Yeah, but you're always doing this, so the dip. It's kind of like if you live like this, and I did it for a while, where you hadn't reached beyond the plateau, which you think in certain areas. But now I live like this. So it's rising, just like the stock market is always it's high it's ever been. So people freak out. I'm like, it's a cycle thing. But if you understand it, you don't freak out. You know what to do. But if you start to understand the cycles, I'm like, well, this always happens. And if we take our emotions out of it, the dips aren't as low. But the physics of the world, in order to elevate higher, like a skateboarder needs to embrace the going down to get to that beautiful point where you're not moving
to
any
get
higher.
that air.
Yeah, you need. Yeah, it's at one point like a skateboarder will get there. It's the moment when they're not going any higher, but they're not falling, and they do all that work just for that moment, where they're still frame, and then boom, they come down again. That's what we do it for. How we do it, it's up to you. Yeah, but just do it. Know that that's why we're here to an extent.
And when you depicted this journey, I was thinking about how there's this motto I live by for myself that I just say, accept what you can expect. Now, that doesn't mean live with all these rigid expectations, but, if you're, let's say you're dieting, you can expect you're going to be hungry. That's part of dieting.
Yeah.
So you have to accept that hunger. So if you are trying to expand in your business or in a relationship or in friendships, you can expect there's going to be some of this. You're learning someone, so you don't know something, and then you find something out and you like it, and then you're like, well, that opens up another idea, and now I have to go back in the trenches and understand that. So you can accept that in building something really amazing or positive or fulfilling or life-giving, there are going to be dips because you have to learn, and if you already knew what you needed to do to be here, you would be there, but you're not. So you have to accept that there's going to be those. Yeah.
And that's like the thing. You want to make sure you get out of that. How much energy, how much momentum I need to make it beyond the point. So it lets you know, like, if you're always in that place, there is something you are doing wrong. So life will indicate right or wrong from that standpoint. Is it working or not? And so life will teach you that. But once you're like, I can't do this, I'm like, well, you can, because you wouldn't want to do it if you couldn't. It's just that you might have to put a little more effort, or I should say more energy into it, amplify yourself up higher, and there's tricks to it. So for you, when you're dealing with a client, like what tricks, I shouldn't say tricks, but like what things you have them input into their thought process to get them to elevate to a higher level, even though they're here?
I ask a lot of questions.
There you go.
I ask
that's the best way.
Well, you want to pull out their head talk. You want to see where their headspace is.
Yes, I ask a lot of questions. I ask them how they interpreted certain things or what they're experiencing through the things that they're committing to or not committing to. And when it comes to taking it to the next level, I want to get an understanding of what they think will change in their life if they do, because a lot of times that can open us up to see where is the resistance. Because if we do take the path of least resistance, then when we come up to a point of resistance, we're going to avoid it. So by asking a client something like, well, what actually happens when you get the success that you want? Or what actually happens if you no longer were binge eating? Or what actually happens if you, all these things, right? And a lot of the times they're like, well, if I wasn't binging anymore, everything would be amazing and great. I'm like, really? So how would you process these emotions? Oh God. Suddenly now if I give up binging, I'm giving up my coping skill. Or if I give up binging, I'm giving up the opportunity to eat these really highly palatable foods. So then we go, well, if that's the resistance, then we need to find a way to still cope with the emotions and still enjoy highly palatable foods. So now I've just like unlocked, the next best step for them could probably be some exposure. The next best step would probably be to understand their beliefs around what it takes to get where they want to go. So by asking a question of like, what do you envision changing in your life? I think it can be a lot of insight, and that's for the better and for the worse. Like, how is this maladaptive behavior serving you? Because it's in your life for a reason. It's probably serving a really good purpose. Yeah. So if we know what that purpose is that it's serving, we can identify other ways to fulfill that purpose. So that's, one trick is like identify what it is that they actually think would change in their life. And also sometimes I've had it where we'll be doing this with a client and they're like, oh my God, I actually realize right now in this moment that I don't care about this goal. I only wanted
I'm sure that happens a lot.
Yeah. They're like, I only wanted it because I thought I was supposed to, but really I'm okay with just doing this and focusing my energy elsewhere. And I'm like, how beautiful that you've been able to let go of what you thought you should experience or do and now embrace who you really want to be in this pursuit. Yeah. So that's something. And then if we got like even more tangible, I like things like journaling. I like things like reflection. And when you brought up neural pathways earlier, I'm a big believer in execution day in and day out as often as possible to form new associations. So when I'm looking at somebody who's struggling with their relationship with food, it's like, what's your current relationship with food? What's the relationship with food you want? How do we reinforce enough times to get you here? So if they have an association with these are bad foods, okay, we're going to form a new association, and that's repetition. And then when it's something like body image and, they always are body checking, let's say, well, okay, where do your eyes always go? Well, they always go to my waist because I'm being judged on my waist on stage. Okay, so let's put a cardboard here and now train your eyes to come up or train your eyes to go somewhere else. So there's a lot of tangible things, but a big part of it's asking the right questions.
Yeah, but the tangible with the questions, because, everything that we imagine we want to see in its tangible form. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, because they go together.
Well, it's like you can't just. Also, what I don't like is a lot of times people will be like talking about problems, but I'm like very solutions oriented. I'm like, you can only talk about your problems so much before you actually figure out a way to get through them. And so much of the resources I've developed through my coaching program, through my services, is because I have tested them, I've studied, I've like applied those lessons to create. Yeah. They work. Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, there's a reason why I get the results I do, but it's really ultimately up to the person implementing it and applying it. And it's in the application that the breakthrough is had. It's not knowing that doing a mindfulness-based eating practice, or it's not knowing that finding other ways to fulfill this or incorporating this into your day that will ultimately get you the result that you're seeking. It's the implementation and the willingness to fail and learn and grow. Like, I have clients sometimes who are like, oh man, today was like not as good as yesterday and I'll be better tomorrow. And I'm like, I'm so glad you had a not so great day today so we could get more insight into how to make tomorrow better. Like, let's use that to our advantage. So I just don't like the whole problem talk. I'm very much more solutions oriented, like knowing multiple parts of yourself can exist at one time and you can learn from them, and understanding that like when someone comes to me too, they're vulnerable and I respect and honor them for where they're at. And the fact that they trust me is like such an important thing to me. Like, it humbles me. So remembering and honoring it's their journey. It's not mine, and I don't project onto that. My intention is never to project on them or give them the result I want for them. It's always focused on their autonomy and what they want.
Because they know. They just got lost in the woods and they don't know how to get there.
And even when I was counseling at the center, I had this realization. I was like, these people could be telling me anything right now, And I'm like, but the beautiful thing is what they're telling me is them giving themselves insight into what they need to do or believe. So someone could be telling me all these negative things about their relationship. I'm like, you just told me everything you needed to know. Mm-hmm. Because if you didn't even think to acknowledge the positives or express this, like, you already have your answer. So me as a counselor is like, I'm facilitating this exploration, but I'm in no way gonna tell someone. Like, I even had domestic violence clients. It was not my place to say, leave that relationship. And people are like, that's so surprising. You would think that that's what every person in their family, all their friends are telling them to leave the relationship. Mm. My job as a counselor is not to tell them to leave the relationship. It's to help them become the version of themselves that's empowered to make the best decision that fits their view of life. And as hard as it is sometimes when you're sitting in front of someone who you're like, how could they do this? Mm-hmm. What's going on? I want to just tell them. You can't tell them. Telling people what to do, it doesn't work. You got to guide them. Yeah.
No. It's getting them to see what they need to do. And that's what you do brilliantly.
Based on the information they're giving you.
Yeah, they'll tell you everything.
Yeah.
that's why, like any question that's ever asked, the answer comes to the person asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that. So when people ask me questions, I'm like, you're giving me the answer. I'm just bringing it back onto what you want to hear, so to speak. And I don't mean it in a condescending way. Like people, like every question has an answer tied to it, just like every quarter has a heads and tail tied to it. So it's on the other side. Like your dad said, just pivot and you'll see the answer or the solution to the problem in which you're seeing.
Yes.
Just pivot. Flip it over. That's where it is. Every problem that you deem to be a problem is a challenge, and the solution comes with it. No problems ever come without a solution. It's just, how do we get out of it? You got to pivot. Sometimes you don't want to pivot. Pivot.
Well, because then you become vulnerable to having more problems. As soon as you're like,
it's true.
all right, I'm going to solve this problem. And then you're like, but now all of a sudden I'm realizing I'm an emotional
That list doesn't
wreck.
end.
Exactly. Like, I've opened
It's
Pandora's
that can of
box.
worm type thing. Yeah. It's like, wow.
And everybody's been there
Keep
too.
it closed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just exist in the current reality
Yeah.
because it's much less painful.
Yeah.
Much less
How does that work?
Well, Celeste, it sounds like your clients are extremely lucky to be working with you.
Yeah.
You know,
And your future clients.
yeah, I was gonna say, especially future clients, because what you're doing is you're showing everybody it's not this or that. It's not black or white. It's not just your physical and then the mental will come. It's not just the mental and then the physical. You're teaching the whole mind body approach, and like
It's just
we could not
teaching
be more about
Yeah.
that
Just
than
you're teaching them they already have the answer.
Yeah.
You're the one
Everyone.
holding the mirror and say, hey, there's your
And
answer.
it's okay that that's your answer.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it is. It's brilliant. Yeah.
In fact, you came here to play this role. You know, you very much wanted
Yeah.
to come and have this very experience that we're having. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to see it that way when we're experiencing it as this. You know, Mike Kittless, I'm this character in this, reality. But when you can step outside of that, wow.
But even like this conversation show, I'm sure, I don't know about you guys, but I always go back and listen to it because I don't know what would happen.
Oh yeah.
Like I really
100%.
don't. Like I remember certain things, but I remember from vantage point when I watch, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize Mike said that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I was there when he said it.
Yeah.
But watching it's different.
Yep.
So again, they stand out. But yet in this moment, I can't be thinking of how this is going to sound.
Yeah.
It'd be weird. It'd be weird.
Well, that's honestly where a lot of people spend their life.
Karen
it's like
wishes
walking.
I actually did that.
But you know what
by
I
the
mean?
way.
But like walking into any situation, like,
Yeah.
is this person gonna like me? Do my clothes look good? Like the reason
Right.
when I interact with people, I never am worried about what's going on with me because I know the other person is in their head worrying about what's going on, etc. All this, and I do this with clients all the time. When I'm out working and stuff, nobody. We all think we're like sharing this experience and stuff, but everybody's having their own unique little experience.
Yeah.
And so when you can detach from that and create that space, like it begins to flow with so much more ease.
But
And you're no longer like
but
measuring
you
and
could-
judging.
Yeah, you could be like, you could be the lighthouse.
Yeah.
You can change a room, and it seems like you do
Exactly.
that really well.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you
Oh,
do.
yeah.
Like I could tell. Yeah,
Thank you.
like I was telling Mike yesterday because we've never really officially met till yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
officially.
Frank called me yesterday and told me he met you.
Awesome.
Well, this always happens to me, and I don't think anything's a miracle now. It's just unexperienced things that are happening. But you have I was literally done with my workout, and I came over to do some core, and Karen was next to me, and then you came up behind me. I'm like, all right, we're gonna be on the show tomorrow. And it was kind of nice, And I told
It
Mike,
was
I'm like,
nice.
yeah, it's how it happens,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I could explain a little bit, but it's almost like the universe does it for us. And we're just
100%.
experiencing it.
Yeah.
People needed to hear this story, and this is awesome. And we will absolutely be having you back.
Thank you. I would love that.
Oh yeah. This is
I know. I
fun.
feel like we could talk for hours. I'm like, oh my goodness. But
Well, that's the thing. When you're talking about these concepts, they can.
yes.
There's
and-
so
end.
much that we have just scratched the surface on.
There's no end,
Exactly. And maybe people will have questions, but I just want to say I've appreciated how authentic both of you have been because it holds space for other people to be authentic as well. And when you're talking about people worrying about what others think, it's like that authentic energy is what releases us from it because we know it'll attract certain people or
Yeah,
repel certain
100%.
experiences.
You have no idea. I mean, that's what we have no idea who it's going to affect, but we know it's going to affect. And we obviously always try to affect people in a positive way. But again, we try to be as authentic as we can.
Right, because sometimes, when you're in that super high energy, you're like this in the grocery store, you're
Mhm.
feeling hype, and that person over there is like, oh my God, this person is way too much. It's fine. Doesn't mean it's not positive. It's like they're not having that experience, but you're still showing up as you. And then this person over here is all stoked as well. So it's good to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's it.
It's a balance, that's for sure.
Yeah, be yourself.
Celeste, tell us where we can, listeners at home, where they can find your information. YouTube, Instagram. Tell us a little bit about more information for you.
Yeah, so on www.celestial.fit, everything is listed there on the social media section, but my main platform's Instagram is celestial_fit. And then if you are into YouTube, it's the same thing. I will say I do have a TikTok as well,
Nice.
but I don't promote like a lot of this. I mostly focus on like mental health topics and stuff just because it fulfills me. Mental health is not specifically related to bodybuilding, but yeah, you can find me there. And then my book is Believe Your Way to Badass, and it is on Amazon. So
Believe Your Way to Badass. I'm gonna check that book out.
Nice title, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What year did that come out?
2016. I
Nice.
was 19, and it hit bestseller in 24 hours, and it was
right on.
an amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. But yeah, I think it's still a good book, even though there's things that update now. Still.
Yeah, everything's still relevant.
I was going to say, we're going to be updating the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the growth.
It's almost all the parts of me that wrote that book are dead, right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
One more year.
But
Yeah.
they're still here too.
Yeah.
That part of you is still here. Yeah.
Seriously, Celeste, it was awesome having you on the show today. I know listeners at home loved it. Frank and I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
We will be having you back. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with, as far as a message to them, something, important to you or your brand?
I feel like we covered everything,
Yeah.
and I'm
Good.
really grateful that I got to share as much as I did. So I'm happy with everything that was said.
Well, there you go. She's happy.
That's all we can ask for.
That's it.
So thank you guys for joining us on this week's episode of Perspective Shift. We will be back next week.
Yes.
Other than that, if you like what you heard, guys, click the subscribe link below. You can email us any questions to perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com. And other than that, guys, we will see you next week. Thank you to Miss Celeste Rains-Turk. We appreciate your time
Thanks,
today.
Celeste.
Thank you guys.
All right.
And we'll see you guys soon.
All right. Peace out.